Night is not merely the absence of day, my friend. Night is a quiet room in consciousness. It is the hour when the outer world loosens its hand from your throat, when the visible facts no longer stand so close, when the voices of the day begin to fade, and the soul may hear another voice beneath them. Men think the problem is strongest when the world is still, because then there is nothing to distract them from it. But I tell you, the stillness of night is not the problem's kingdom. It is the chamber where the problem may lose its authority. You may be lying here now with something that has followed you through the day. It may have followed you into your work, into your meal, into your thoughts, into your silence, into your prayers, into your breathing. Perhaps it is a practical matter. Perhaps it concerns money. Perhaps it concerns another person. Perhaps it concerns a decision, a delay, a fear, a letter, a conversation, a door that has not yet opened, or a burden so private that you have hardly spoken it even to yourself. The name of the problem does not matter tonight. What matters is the state in which you have been carrying it. For perhaps you have tried to solve it by thinking. You have turned it over again and again in the mind, as one turns a key in a lock that will not yield. You have planned, revised, waited, pushed, reasoned, prayed, imagined, questioned, remembered, anticipated, and still the problem has seemed to remain. You have perhaps asked, what must I do? What must I say? How shall this change? When will the answer come? Why has it not moved? And the more you asked, the heavier the thing appeared. But tonight will not be another night of wrestling. Tonight, I will lead you away from the state that keeps the problem alive and into the state where the answer already exists. You will not be asked to fight the outer circumstance. You will not be asked to force a person, force a road, force a sign, force a result, or force the mind into a strained belief. You will learn how to lay down the burden inwardly, how to stop sleeping inside the question, and how to enter the quiet assumption that the answer is already formed in consciousness. For the problem is not solved by force. It is solved when you cease to occupy the problem and begin to occupy the answer. Before you drift more deeply into this teaching, take one small outer action that reflects your inner decision. Subscribe to this channel, not as a casual act, not as a noise of the world, but as a quiet seal of your willingness to return to the law, to practice this inner movement, and to sleep no longer as one defeated by appearances. Let that small action say within you, I am no longer here to wrestle with the problem. I am here to enter the state of the answer. And if you have not done it yet, subscribe now as a second inward yes. Let it be simple. Let it be calm. Let it be your sign that you are willing to come back to these teachings until the old habit of force loses its place within you. Every time you return, you water the seed of a new state. Every time you listen in this spirit, you remind the subconscious that the problem is not your master. Do it gently, and then let that outer act be finished. From this moment onward, the work is inward, silent, and deep. Now return to the quiet. The problem is not solved by force. Let this sentence begin to move through you slowly. The problem is not solved by force. This does not mean you will never act. It does not mean you will never speak, never decide, never move, never write, never answer, never choose. It means that before action can be clean, the state must be changed. It means that action born from panic often repeats the problem, while action born from the answer becomes part of the bridge. It means that the outer motion is not the cause. Consciousness is the cause. You may have tried to force the problem because you believed the problem had power of its own. You may have believed it was solid, fixed, final, independent, and greater than your imagination. You may have believed that if you did not think about it constantly, it would grow worse. You may have believed that worry was responsibility, that tension was wisdom, that sleeplessness was devotion, and that repeating the difficulty in the mind was a form of preparing for life. But preparation in fear is often only another way of planting fear. Tonight you are not being condemned for this. I do not speak to you as one accusing you. I speak to you as one reminding you of your own power. You did what men and women do before they know the law. You looked at the outer thing and called it cause. You saw the fact, felt the fear, and then tried to repair the fact while remaining in the fear. But there can be no true outer change until there is first an imaginal change. Everything done without a change of state is only a readjustment of surfaces. If you have carried the problem into sleep night after night, this does not mean you have failed. It means a state has been repeated. The subconscious has been receiving the atmosphere of the problem, the feeling of being trapped, the sense that the answer is absent, the belief that the burden is yours alone. And being faithful, the subconscious has continued to present the world in the likeness of that state, not because life is cruel, not because heaven is deaf, not because you are unworthy, but because consciousness must express what it accepts. Now the state can be changed. This is why night is merciful. During the day, the senses stand like witnesses, speaking loudly of what is seen, what is missing, what has not happened, what must be done, what others have said, what seems delayed, what seems impossible. During the day, the mind argues with appearances and calls that argument thinking. But at night, the senses grow softer, the body becomes quieter, the facts lose some of their sharpness. The conscious mind, tired from defending the old story, begins to lower its guard. And in that softening, another state may be chosen. Night is the room where the problem can no longer shout so loudly. Night is the room where the old scene can be revised. Night is the room where the question can be replaced by the answer. Night is the room where consciousness may withdraw its life from the problem and give life to the fulfilled state. If you understand this, you will stop treating sleep as an escape. Sleep is not merely a disappearance from the problem. Sleep is the door through which your final assumption enters the deep. If you fall asleep in the problem receives another night of life. If you fall asleep in the answer receives the creative power of your own being. The night itself is not partial, it receives what you carry into it, and so tonight I ask you, what will you carry into the deep? Will you carry the old question? Will you carry the argument? Will you carry the fear? Will you carry the image of things remaining as they are? Will you carry the repeated feeling that you are stuck? Or will you carry the answer? The answer does not need to be explained tonight. The answer does not need to show you all its roads before you sleep. The answer does not need to present every person, every turn, every word, every event, every hour, every means. The answer is a state first. The bridge comes after. The state is cause. The events are servants. The imaginal act is the beginning. The facts must follow. This is the great reversal. The old mind says, when the problem is solved, then I will rest. But the awakened imagination says, I rest in the state of the solved problem, and the solution must find its way. The old mind says, when I see the answer, then I will believe. But the law says, believe by entering the state, and the answer will be seen. The old mind says, I must force the outer world. But the law says, change the inner state, and the outer world will move. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. Let that phrase come near you. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. Do not try to understand it with the forehead. Let it be heard by the deeper self. The answer is already here does not mean the senses have already reported it. It means the state of the answer exists in imagination now. It means there is a version of you who is no longer carrying the burden. There is a version of you who has heard the good news, received the right word, seen the door open, felt the pressure lift, and gone to sleep in peace. That self exists in imagination, and imagination is not nothing. Imagination is the true creative power. I do not force the way means I do not wrestle with the bridge before I have entered the end. I do not demand that the conscious mind invent what the deeper power already knows how to arrange. I do not keep my hands around the problem while asking to be free from it. I do not stand in the state of fear and call it responsibility. I do not use the night to rehearse what I do not want. I release the old state and enter the answer. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. If you have been tired, let that sentence meet your tiredness. If you have been afraid, let it meet your fear. If you have been trying to force something into place, let it meet your strain. If you have been waiting for someone to change, for a letter to arrive, for money to come, for a door to open, for a burden to lift, for peace to return, let this sentence meet the place where you have been waiting. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. Perhaps the mind says, but I do not see the answer. That is all right. The senses do not create, they report. And very often they report the residue of a former state. If you continue to let the senses name the state, you remain servant to what has been. But tonight you are not a servant of what has been. Tonight you are choosing the state that shall be. Perhaps the mind says, but I have tried before. Yes, perhaps you tried while still feeling trapped. Perhaps you imagined while still sleeping in the problem. Perhaps you prayed while still wearing the old identity. Perhaps you repeated words while the body continued to say, I am afraid. This does not mean the law failed. It means the state was divided. Tonight we are not trying to decorate the problem with spiritual words. We are moving out of the problem state. A man may speak of peace while inwardly preparing for war. The subconscious receives the war. A woman may speak of solution while inwardly rehearsing disaster. The subconscious receives the disaster. One may say, it is done, while feeling, it may never happen. The deeper mind receives the feeling. So tonight, the words must become atmosphere. The phrase must become rest. The command must become the mood in which the body sleeps. It is handled. Let this be simple. It is handled. Let the body hear it. It is handled. Let the problem stop being carried for a moment. The way is opening. Let the mind stop striking the wall. The bridge is forming. Let the conscious mind stop demanding the map. The law works in silence. Let the silence become friendly. This is not denial. Denial is often fear, pretending not to see. Assumption is not denial. Assumption sees that the outer appearance has been given too much authority and returns authority to consciousness. Assumption says, I know what appears, but I will not let the appearance name me. I know what has happened, but I will not sleep in it. I know the problem has seemed real, but I will now enter the state where it is already solved. The problem loses authority when you cease to identify with it. It may still have a name in the outer world, but it no longer has the right to define I am. You are not the problem. You are not the delay. You are not the fear. You are not the mistake. You are not the silence. You are not the closed door. You are not the difficulty. You are the consciousness in which a new state may be born. I am not the problem. Let that be heard. I am not the problem. The problem is a state I have carried. I am not the problem. The answer is a state I may enter. I am not the problem. I now enter the answer. There is great relief in this. You have perhaps been wearing the problem so closely that it felt like your own skin. You may have said inwardly, I am stuck, when really you meant a stuck state has been occupied. You may have said, I am helpless, when really you meant a helpless state has been repeated. You may have said, I am waiting, when really you meant a waiting state has become familiar. But states can be left. Garments can be removed. The old state is not your eternal identity. Tonight, the garment of the problem is being loosened. You do not have to tear it from yourself in anger. You do not have to fight it. You do not have to prove that you are free by feeling nothing. You only have to stop giving it your final consent before sleep. You only have to stop carrying it as your last inward reality. You only have to let another state become more important than the old one. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. The matter is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. I sleep in the solution. Notice how different this is from the old movement. The old movement leans forward. It reaches, it tightens, it tries to compel, it says I must solve this before I can rest. The new movement settles, it returns, it receives, it says I enter rest because the solution exists in consciousness, and the world must follow the state I accept. The old movement says, what if? The new movement says, it is handled. The old movement says, there is no way. The new movement says, the way is opening. The old movement says, I must force it. The new movement says, the law works in silence. The old movement says, I cannot sleep until I know. The new movement says, sleep is where the new knowing is sealed. This is why night is sacred to the one who understands imagination. The day may have given you many appearances, but night gives you the opportunity to change the state from which appearances will be met. The day may have shown you the problem, but night allows you to enter the answer. The day may have made the difficulty seem solid, but night softens the senses and lets imagination become the more real world. What would you be if this problem were already solved? Do not answer quickly. Let the question open a space. What would you be if this problem were already solved? Would you still hold the shoulders in the same way? Would the breath still be guarded? Would the mind still return to the same scene again and again? Would the heart still feel hunted? Or would there be a small, quiet release? A sense that the matter is no longer master? A sense that you may lie down without defending the problem? A sense that the answer has entered the room? This small release is enough to begin. You do not need extreme emotion tonight. You do not need to become excited. You do not need to convince the whole mind in one moment. You only need to move from the problem toward the answer. You only need to let the answer become more restful than the fear. You only need to give the subconscious a new final impression. It is handled, the way is opening, the bridge is forming. I do not force, I receive the answer. I sleep in peace. Let these words become like lamps placed along the inward path. Each one shows only a little of the road, but enough for the next step. You do not need to see the whole road tonight. The whole road is not required for sleep. The seed does not need to see the tree. The seed only needs to be planted. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. This is the seed. It is handled. This is the relief. The bridge is forming. This is the trust. The law works in silence. This is the end of supervision. I sleep in the solution. This is the new identity. Now, let the problem lose its sharpness, not by denying that you have cared, not by pretending that it meant nothing, but by remembering that no appearance is final unless consciousness continues to sustain it. What appears in the world seems powerful because attention, feeling, and belief have fed it. Tonight you are withdrawing that food. You are not feeding the problem with another night of fear. You are feeding the answer with your final assumption. The problem may say, think of me. The answer says, it is handled. The problem may say, rehearse me. The answer says, the way is opening. The problem may say, fear me. The answer says, I am guided. The problem may say, force me. The answer says, I rest in the end. Let the answer speak more softly and yet more truly. The problem often speaks loudly because it depends on your fear. The answer speaks quietly because truth does not need to shout. Enter the quiet voice. Follow the quiet voice. Sleep in the quiet voice. I am guided. I am supported. I am not the problem. The answer is already here. The burden is lifted. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. It is done in consciousness. As you listen, the outer world may still be where it was. That does not matter tonight. The outer world is not your master. It is an effect. You are not waiting for the effect to give you permission to change the cause. The change of cause begins now, in the quiet, in the inward room, in the imaginal state you choose before sleep. If you wait for the problem to disappear before you feel free, you make the problem your God. But if you enter freedom in imagination, the problem must lose its throne. The night is where the problem loses its authority. Not because darkness is magical in itself, not because sleep is escape, not because you pretend nothing exists, but because consciousness in the quiet of night can stop consenting to the problem as final. Tonight, the problem will not be your final state. Tonight, the fear will not be your final identity. Tonight, the question will not be your final prayer. Tonight, the argument will not be your final inner speech. Tonight, you will not wrestle with the problem. Tonight, you will be guided into the state where the answer already exists. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. Let that be the first doorway. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. Let that be the first release. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. Let that be the first release. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. Let that be the first movement. You are not asked to solve everything now. You are asked to stop sleeping as the one who has no solution. You are not asked to force the road. You are asked to enter the state from which the road appears. You are not asked to defeat the problem by struggle. You are asked to cease giving it the final authority of your own consciousness. And as the night deepens, this will become easier. The day's evidence will grow dimmer. The body will grow quieter. The mind will grow slower. The old facts will lose their sharp edges. And in that softened place, the answer may be accepted. It is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. The law works in silence. I sleep in the solution. Tonight you will not wrestle with the problem. Tonight you will not force the answer. Tonight you will not carry the burden as your final name. Tonight you will be guided into the state where the answer already exists. Now, my friend, we must look quietly at the thing you have called the problem. Not to fear it, not to magnify it, not to wrestle with it in the night, but to see it in its proper place. For the moment a man believes the problem is the true cause, he becomes its servant. He stands before it as before an altar. He studies it, bows to it, reasons from it, sleeps with it, wakes with it, consults it before he dares to feel free. And by doing so, he gives to the problem an authority it does not truly possess. Men believe the problem is outside them. They believe it stands there, fixed and solid, with a life of its own. They look at a circumstance, a conversation, a silence, a delay, a decision, a letter, a figure, a condition, and they say, this is the cause of my state. They say, because this exists, I must feel as I feel. Because this has happened, I must be anxious. Because this has not changed, I cannot rest. Because the fact remains, I am bound. And in that very confession, they surrender the throne of consciousness to an appearance. But I tell you, the fact is not the true cause. The fact is the shadow. The fact is the garment. The fact is the visible form of an invisible activity. What appears without has its root within. The world that men call solid is woven out of imaginal activity, and though it seems independent, it is sustained by the state in which it is held. Nothing continues in your world by a power entirely of its own. It continues because consciousness continues to feed it, to feel it, to name it, to expect it, to carry it, to sleep in it. This does not mean that the appearance is not seen. I do not ask you to close your eyes to the world in a childish way. I do not ask you to say that a letter was not received when it was received, that a word was not spoken when it was spoken, that a door did not appear closed when it appeared closed. The law is not foolishness. The law is not pretending that the shadow is invisible. The law is understanding that the shadow is not the source. If a man sees a shadow upon the wall, he may spend his whole life striking at the wall. He may polish the wall, scold the wall, plead with the wall, accuse the wall, fear the wall, and sleep before the wall in despair. But if he turns and changes the object before the lamp, the shadow must change. The problem in the outer world is often like that shadow. It appears upon the wall of experience, and because it appears, men call it cause. But the true cause is the imaginal arrangement within consciousness. Now hear this gently, for it must not be turned into guilt. I am not telling you that you are to blame. Blame belongs to the old world of punishment, and punishment does not awaken the creative power of man. The law is not given to accuse you, it is given to free you. If something has appeared through a state, then it can begin to be unmade through another state. If an old imaginal activity has given form to the problem, a new imaginal activity may begin to give form to the answer. This is not condemnation, this is power restored. Many people hear that imagination creates reality and immediately use it against themselves. They say, then I have caused all my pain, then I must be guilty, then I must have done something wrong. No, my friend, do not fall into that trap. The awakening of imagination is not a courtroom where you stand accused. It is a throne room where you remember who you are. You are not here to condemn the state you occupied in ignorance. You are here to leave it. You are not here to beat yourself for having believed in the problem. You are here to stop believing in it as cause. A child may walk in darkness and strike his foot against a stone. When the lamp is lit, do we condemn the child for not having seen? No, we give him light. So tonight, I do not condemn you. I give you light. You may have carried the problem as cause because you did not know another way to carry it. You may have thought worry was wisdom. You may have thought that if you loosened your grip, the problem would grow stronger. You may have thought that constant attention was necessary to prevent disaster. But now you are learning that attention joined with fear often sustains what it fears. The problem appears in the world, yes, but its continued power comes from the state in which it is held. This is the point, not the appearance only, but the state in which the appearance is held. Two people may meet the same outer condition and live in entirely different worlds because the condition is not the final reality. One holds it in fear, another holds it in faith. One holds it as defeat, another holds it as transition. One holds it as an ending, another holds it as the beginning of a bridge. One says, this proves I am trapped. Another says, this too must serve the state I occupy, and life must answer the state. A conflict held in fear continues as conflict. If in imagination you continue to meet the person as adversary, if you continue to hear the old words, if you rehearse the argument, prepare your defense, anticipate injury, and sleep in the feeling that the relationship is danger, then conflict remains clothed in your own feeling. The outer conversation may be silent for the moment, but inwardly it is still speaking. The battle is still being imagined. The wound is still being fed. And because it is fed, it seems to continue. But the same conflict held from the end begins to change. If you enter the state where peace is already restored, if you hear the voice softened, if you feel the matter settled, if you inwardly shake hands with resolution, if you lie down no longer as the one injured, but as the one reconciled, then the conflict has lost its root in you. It may still appear in the middle, but the middle is no longer master. The imaginal end has begun to draw the event toward another form. A financial pressure held as danger continues as pressure. If the figure, the date, the obligation, or the uncertainty is held in the body as threat, if every thought of it tightens the chest and says, I am unsafe, if night after night you sleep in the feeling that life is closing in, then pressure has become a state. The outer thing may be financial, but the inner command is danger, and the subconscious, receiving danger, finds ways to reflect danger. But financial pressure held from the end becomes the beginning of provision. If instead you enter the state where the matter is handled, where the payment is made, where the way has opened, where the body exhales, where you say quietly, "Thank God that is settled," then the pressure is no longer worshipped as cause. It becomes material for the bridge. A person may speak, a road may open, a forgotten possibility may appear, an idea may come with simplicity. The same matter that seemed to threaten may become the very path by which you learn the law. A silence held as rejection continues, as rejection. If another's silence is imagined as proof that you are forgotten, unloved, unwanted, dismissed, or abandoned, then silence becomes filled with your own meaning. The silence itself may be empty, but imagination gives it a voice. It says, "You are not chosen, you are not remembered, you are not desired, you are outside." And if you accept that voice as truth, then the silence becomes a state of rejection. But silence held from the end begins to soften. If you assume that you are remembered, that peace is present, that love is not absent, that the right word comes in its appointed way, that the silence is not a verdict but a passage, then you have changed the meaning within yourself. You have stopped allowing silence to name you. You have withdrawn "I am" from abandonment and placed it in assurance. Then silence itself may become part of the bridge, not evidence of defeat. A delay held as failure continues as delay. If you call the delay proof that nothing works, proof that the answer is not yours, proof that life is closed, proof that you are late, proof that the law has failed you, then delay becomes failure in consciousness. And what is held as failure continues to produce the feeling of failure. But a delay held from the end may become preparation, protection, arrangement, hidden movement. If you stand inwardly in the fulfilled state and say, "Even this delay belongs to the bridge," then delay loses its sting. You do not need to understand it. You do not need to explain it. You need only refuse to make it cause. The bridge of incidents often contains pauses, turns, detours, waiting rooms, and quiet intervals. The old state calls them failure. The fulfilled state calls them movement, unseen. This is why I say the problem is not the true cause. The conflict is not the true cause. The pressure is not the true cause. The silence is not the true cause. The delay is not the true cause. These are appearances, and appearances change when the imaginal activity supporting them changes. The state is closer to cause than the visible condition. Imagination is cause. Feeling is creative. Assumption is the seed. The world follows. Do not let the problem hypnotize you by its appearance of solidity. A fact may look firm, but a fact is not eternal. Facts are the children of former states. They are the footprints of imaginal activities that have already moved through consciousness. And because they are children of imagination, imagination can alter their family line. It can revise, reshape, and redirect. What imagination has made, imagination can unmake. What imagination has clothed, imagination can reclothe. What imagination has sustained, imagination can withdraw from. This is the mystery most men miss. They wait for facts to change before they will change their state, not realizing the facts are waiting for the state. They say, "When the conflict softens, I will feel peace." But the law says, "Feel peace, and the conflict must find a new road." They say, "When the pressure is removed, I will feel relief." But the law says, "Enter relief, and pressure must begin to lose its form." They say, "When the silence is broken, I will feel remembered." But the law says, "Assume remembrance, and silence no longer has the same power." They say, "When the delay ends, I will believe." But the law says, "Believe by entering the end, and delay becomes servant." The old way makes the problem cause. The awakened way makes imagination cause. The old way says, "Because this appears, I must be this." The awakened way says, "Because I am, I may choose the state from which this appearance is transformed." The old way says, "The world tells me who I am." The awakened way says, "I am" tells the world what it must become. Now let this not be made hard. You do not need to leap tonight into some great dramatic feeling. You are not required to deny every sensation of concern. You are not required to smile at the problem or pretend you have never cared. You are only asked to see that the problem is not the God of your inner life. You are asked to take the crown from the appearance and return it to consciousness. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. This phrase is a return to cause. The answer is already here. That means I do not wait for the senses to give me permission to enter the solved state. The answer exists in imagination now. It exists as peace now. It exists as relief now. It exists as the scene after the problem is resolved now. It exists as the self who is no longer bound now. And I can enter that self. I do not force the way. That means I do not treat the problem as cause and then attempt to beat it into submission. I do not spend the night shaking the shadow on the wall. I do not try to control every event while still occupying fear. I change the imaginal position. I move inwardly. I enter. The way is then compelled by law to form. Consider a man looking at a locked gate. If he believes the gate is cause, he may spend all night mourning the iron. He may describe it, measure it, curse it, push against it, and tell himself that freedom depends upon the gate changing first. But suppose he discovers that in imagination he is already beyond the gate. Suppose he walks inwardly in the field beyond it, feels the open air, hears the sound of freedom, and knows himself no longer confined. Then the gate has lost its authority in consciousness. The outer gate must either open, become irrelevant, or lead him to another road. The form may surprise him, but the state has changed. So it is with your problem. You do not need to stand all night before the gate. Enter the field beyond it. Enter the answer. Enter the relief. Enter the conversation after peace has returned. Enter the room after the decision has been made. Enter the moment after the burden has lifted. Enter the state where you say, it is handled. This inward entrance is not escape, it is creative movement. The problem may still say, look at me. It may still try to summon your old obedience. It may say, I am fixed. It may say, I am solid. It may say, I am independent. It may say, you cannot sleep until I am solved. But now you know that the problem has been borrowing its authority from the state in which you hold it. It has been wearing the clothing of your attention, your fear, your rehearsal, your expectation, your identity. Withdraw these, and it begins to lose its form. Again, do not blame yourself. Let no harsh word enter here. You are not guilty because you once held the problem in fear. You were hypnotized by appearances, as all men are before awakening. You mistook the shadow for the source. You mistook the echo for the voice. You mistook the mirror for the face. But now the error is seen, and seeing is already a loosening. If a man looks into a mirror and sees a troubled face, he does not scrub the mirror until the face smiles. He changes the face, the mirror follows. Your world is such a mirror. The problem seen there is not to be scrubbed through force, while the inner face remains the same. The inner face must change. The state must change. The imaginal activity must change. Then the mirror has no choice but to show the new arrangement. This is why force is so exhausting. Force tries to change the mirror. It tries to rearrange effects while leaving cause untouched. It pushes against the visible while feeling the old invisible. It tries to solve the problem while sleeping as the person who has the problem. But assumption changes cause. It says, I will not sleep as the one trapped in this. I will sleep as the one beyond it. I will not sleep as the one rejected, pressured, delayed, or defeated. I will sleep as the one answered. The problem held from the problem becomes more problem. The problem held from the answer becomes a bridge. This is a beautiful thing when understood. A problem does not need to remain an enemy. Once the state changes, the problem itself may become one of the incidents that leads to fulfillment. The thing you feared may redirect you. The delay may place you at the right hour. The silence may prepare a better word. The pressure may awaken a power you had not used. The closed door may turn you toward the door that was truly yours. But you cannot see this while worshipping the problem as cause. You see it only by entering the end. Therefore, tonight, do not ask the problem to explain itself. It may not know its final use. Do not interrogate the problem in the dark. Do not ask, why are you here? How long will you stay? What will you do to me? These questions keep you in the old relationship. Instead, ask, what is the state in which this is already solved? Ask, who am I after the answer has come? Ask, what is the feeling of release? Ask, what would I be if the burden were lifted? Then enter that. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. If the problem is conflict, enter peace. If the problem is pressure, enter relief. If the problem is silence, enter assurance. If the problem is delay, enter completion. If the problem is uncertainty, enter guidance. If the problem is fear, enter safety. If the problem is shame, enter forgiveness. If the problem is loss, enter restoration. Do not wrestle with the name of the problem. Enter the nature of the answer. There is a self in you who is not troubled by this, not indifferent in a cold way, but free. A self who knows the matter is handled. A self who has already moved beyond the old scene. A self who remembers that imagination. A self who rests because the end has been accepted. Tonight you are not trying to create this self from nothing. You are discovering and occupying him. You are moving into him as one moves into a house prepared. This is the secret of imaginal life. You do not think of the answer as far away. You think from the answer. You occupy it. You let it become the place from which you look. The problem seen from the problem appears as prison. The problem seen from the answer appears as passage. The same outer fact may remain for a moment, but your position has changed, and because your position has changed, its meaning and future must change. From the problem, a delay says, you are forgotten. From the answer, a delay says, the bridge is arranging itself. From the problem, silence says, you are rejected. From the answer, silence says, the right word is forming. From the problem, pressure says, you are unsafe. From the answer, pressure says, provision is taking form. From the problem, conflict says, peace is impossible. From the answer, conflict says, harmony is being called forth. This is not poetry only. This is a practical change of consciousness. A change of consciousness changes conduct, changes expectation, changes perception, changes reaction, changes the roads you notice, the words you speak, the letters you write, the silence you allow, the patience you carry, the action you take, and the events that meet you. When the state changes, you no longer behave as the old state. And because you no longer behave as the old state, the world cannot continue indefinitely in the old pattern. A true inner change is not passivity. It is the beginning of new causation. It is a movement deeper than surface action. It may later produce action. Yes, but the action will not be the same. The letter written from panic and the letter written from fulfillment are not the same letter. Even if the ink appears similar, the conversation entered from fear and the conversation entered from the end are not the same conversation. The waiting done in despair and the waiting done in faith are not the same waiting. The outer gesture may resemble another, but the state gives it meaning and power. That is why tonight, before you take any action, before you speak any word, before you try to solve the matter by force, you must return to cause. You must return to imagination. You must enter the solved state. You must feel, even faintly, that the answer is already here. You must allow the body to know that it need not carry the problem as Lord. The answer is already here, and I do not force. Let it settle again. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. The problem is not the cause. The state is closer to cause. Imagination is cause. The answer is already here. I do not force the way. It may help to imagine that you have been holding a heavy object all day, thinking the object is the problem. You have held it tightly because you feared that if you set it down, something worse would happen. Your hands are tired, your arms ache, your breath is shortened, and now night comes, and I say to you, set it down. The old mind says, but if I set it down, who will solve it? But the deeper truth says, the holding is not the solving. The holding is the state of problem. Set it down and enter the state of answer. Set down the need to keep describing it. Set down the need to keep fearing it. Set down the need to keep rehearsing it. Set down the need to keep it alive in order to feel responsible. Responsibility in the law is not worry. Responsibility is the ability to choose the state. You are not irresponsible when you stop fearing. You are returning to the only true responsibility, your imaginal activity. The world of appearances will still be met when the hour comes, but it will be met from another state, and that makes all the difference. Now let the problem become less fixed. Let it be seen not as stone, but as shadow, not as cause, but as effect, not as master, but as material, not as final, but as movable, not as identity, but as a state formerly occupied. This does not make you careless, it makes you free, for if the problem is not the cause, then you are not trapped by it. If imagination is cause, then the answer may begin tonight. A conflict held in fear continues as conflict, but a conflict held from peace begins to dissolve. A financial pressure held as danger continues as pressure, but pressure held from provision begins to open. A silence held as rejection continues as rejection, But silence held from assurance begins to change. A delay held as failure continues as delay, but delay held from completion becomes part of the bridge. And a problem held from the end begins to dissolve into a bridge. Let that phrase be heard deeply. A problem held from the end becomes a bridge. It no longer remains only an obstruction. It begins to serve. It begins to move. It begins to turn. It begins to reveal roads. It begins to bring forth incidents that the old mind could not have planned. And when you look back, you may see that what you called the problem was only a passage under construction. But tonight, you do not need to look back. Tonight, you need only return to cause, return to imagination, return to the answer, return to the state, return to the quiet inner knowing that the outer fact is not Lord. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. Let the problem lose its crown. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. Let imagination take its rightful place. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. Let the body stop bowing to the appearance. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. Let the night receive the new state. If you can feel even a little release, that is enough. If the problem feels slightly less like identity and more like an appearance, that is enough. If the body softens around the idea that the answer exists in imagination, that is enough. If the phrase, I do not force the way, brings even one small exhale, that is enough. The seed has begun. Do not measure this by outer evidence tonight. The outer evidence belongs to the world of effect. Tonight we are working in cause. The farmer does not plant a seed and immediately demand. He trusts the process hidden in the earth. You are planting a new state in the hidden earth of consciousness. Trust the unseen work. It is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. The law works in silence. I sleep in the solution. These are not sentences of denial. They are sentences of causation. They do not say, there was never an appearance. They say, the appearance is not final. They do not say, I never felt fear. They say, fear is not. They do not say, the problem never seemed real. They say, imagination is more real, because imagination is cause. So now, as night continues to deepen, stop worshipping the problem as cause. Do not make an idol of the circumstance. Do not kneel inwardly before the difficulty. Do not let the appearance dictate your final mood before sleep. You are not here to be hypnotized again by the shadow. You are here to return to the lamp. You are here to return to the lamp. You are here to return to the. You are here to return to imagination. For imagination is cause. The answer is already here. The problem is not my master. The outer fact is not my God. I do not force the way. I return to imagination. I enter the answer. I sleep in the solution. Tonight, you are not here to worship the problem as cause. You are here to return to imagination as cause. Now, my friend, we must speak of force, for force has disguised itself as virtue in the minds of men. Many believe that if they are truly serious, they must strain. If they truly desire the answer, they must wrestle with the problem. If they truly want the outer circumstance to change, they must hold it tightly in thought, turn it over without rest, pursue it through every corridor of the mind, and refuse peace until the world obeys. But this is not the way of imagination. This is not the way of the law. Very often, force is only fear, trying to appear useful. Force carries a hidden confusion. It says, the problem is stronger than I am. It may not say this aloud, but it feels it. Force says, if I do not push, nothing will move. If I do not worry, nothing will be solved. If I do not keep my mind upon this difficulty, it will remain forever. If I release it, I will lose control. And beneath all of that is the old worship of the problem. Beneath all of that is the belief that the outer appearance has more power than the state within. When you try to force the solution from the state of fear, you may actually keep the problem enthroned. You may call it work, you may call it responsibility, you may call it trying your best. But if the inner feeling is panic, then panic is the state being impressed. If the inner feeling is danger, then danger is the state being carried. If the inner feeling is helplessness, then helplessness is the command hidden behind the action. The outer motion may look strong, but the inner state is still kneeling before the problem. Force says, I must make it change. Assumption says, it is already changed in consciousness. Feel the difference. Force begins with the problem as master. It looks at the outer thing and says, you must move before I can be free. Assumption begins with consciousness as cause. It says, I move inwardly first, and what appears without must follow. Force stands at the gate and beats upon it. Assumption enters the room beyond the gate and lives there inwardly until the gate is compelled to open, vanish, or become irrelevant. Force says, I am trapped until the outer world moves. Assumption says, I move inwardly first, and the outer world follows. Force waits for permission. Assumption selects the state. Force believes the fact is final. Assumption knows the fact is shadow. Force says, when they change, when it changes, when the road opens, when the letter arrives, when the answer appears, then I will breathe. Assumption says, I breathe now from the end, and the world must rearrange to justify my breathing. Force says, I cannot rest. Assumption says, rest is the proof that I have entered the answer. This is a deep sign. Rest is not laziness when it is born from fulfilled consciousness. Rest is not indifference. Rest is not surrender to defeat. Rest in the law is the seal of acceptance. When a man truly feels that the matter is handled, he does not continue to wrestle inwardly. When a woman truly enters the state of the answer, she does not keep rehearsing the problem as though it were king. Rest is the body's testimony that imagination has moved from the question into the solution. Now, I do not say this so that you abandon right action. I do not teach you to become idle in the world, to neglect what must be done, or to refuse the ordinary movements of life. There is action that belongs to the fulfilled state. There is a word that must be spoken, a letter that must be written, a road that must be taken, a meeting that must occur, a decision that must be made. But there is a vast difference between action that proceeds from panic and action that proceeds from the answer. Action from panic is crowded. It hurries, it pleads, it grasps. It tries to make another person, another fact, another road, another hour become the savior. It is restless because it is still outside the answer. Action from the fulfilled state may be firm, but it is clean. It may be direct, but it is not desperate. It may move quickly, but it is not inwardly chaste. It acts because the state moves it, not because fear drives it. Before sleep, however, your work is not outer action. Your work is state. The day may ask you to act in its proper hour. The night asks you to assume. The day may bring letters, conversations, choices, and movements. The night asks, who are you when you meet them? Are you the one who is trapped, or the one for whom the answer has already begun? Are you the one who must force, or the one who is guided? Are you the one before the solution, or the one living from the solution? Force before sleep is dangerous to the desire, because it plants the very condition you wish to escape. When a man lies down and continues to push the world in thought, he is not resting in the end. He is still living in the unfinished thing. He is still saying, this is not done, this is not solved, this is not mine, this is not changed, I am waiting, I am threatened, I am bound. And the subconscious receives that unfinished feeling as instruction. But assumption before sleep carries another instruction. It is handled, the way is opening, the answer is already here, the bridge is forming. I do not force the way, I sleep in the solution. These phrases are not weak, they are not passive, they are not the language of defeat. They are the language of cause. They return power to the only place where creative power truly begins, imagination. They say to the subconscious, the state has changed. The old fear is no longer the ruler. The problem is no longer the throne. The answer is now occupied. Force often appears when the mind cannot tolerate the silence of the unseen. The answer has not yet appeared. The bridge is not yet visible. The person has not yet spoken. The letter has not yet arrived. The outer sign has not yet formed, and the mind says, because I cannot see it, I must force it. But the unseen is not empty. The unseen is the workshop of the law. The seed is unseen before the tree. The root is unseen before the blossom. The bridge is unseen before the incident appears. Do not confuse invisibility with absence. The law does not require your fear to build the bridge. It does not require your nightly unrest. It does not require your endless inner argument. It requires your imaginal occupancy. It requires that you live, however gently at first, from the feeling of the wish fulfilled. It requires that you enter the answer and remain loyal to it. The law works in silence, and fear dislikes silence because fear wants noise to prove that something is being done. But the deepest things are often done quietly. A child in the womb is formed in secrecy. A seed in the earth is formed in darkness. A thought that changes a life may begin as a whisper. The bridge of incidents often begins with movements so subtle, the waking mind would not notice them. Someone remembers, someone softens, a delay shifts, an idea ripens, a word is prepared, a path opens, and all the while, the conscious mind, if it is not instructed, may disturb itself by asking, where is it? How will it happen? Why has it not moved? Tonight you will not disturb the seed. You will not pull the root from the earth to see whether it is growing. You will not strike the closed door in fear and call it faith. You will not continue to live in the state of the problem while begging for the state of the answer. You will change the state from which the world is seen. Force says, I must make it change. Assumption says, it is already changed in consciousness. Let that contrast become soft within you. Not a lesson of the head only. Let it be felt in the body. When you say, I must make it change, notice the pressure. Notice how the body leans forward. Notice how the breath becomes narrow. Notice how the mind searches for weapons. This is the posture of one who still believes the problem has the power. Now say inwardly, it is already changed in consciousness. Notice the possibility of release. Perhaps not complete release yet, but a softening. The statement does not require the senses to agree. It only restores order. Consciousness first. Form after, state first, bridge after, assumption first, evidence after. Force says, I am trapped until the outer world moves. Assumption says, I move inwardly first, and the outer world follows. When you say, I am trapped until the outer world moves, you give the key to the outer world. You stand inside a prison whose door is imaginal and say, I cannot be free until the wall disappears. But when you move inwardly first, you discover that consciousness is not locked within the appearances it observes. You may be in the problem physically for a moment, but you need not be in it imaginatively. You can leave the state before the fact changes, and when the state is left, the fact has lost its future. Force says, I cannot rest. Assumption says, rest is the proof that I have entered the answer. This does not mean that you must force rest. That would be another form of strain. It means that as you enter the answer, rest becomes natural. The body rests because it is no longer carrying the problem as identity. The mind rests because it is no longer trying to build the bridge by worry. The heart rests because it has tasted the feeling that the matter is handled. Rest comes as the fruit of inward movement. So if you cannot rest at once, do not say, I have failed. Say, I am learning to enter the answer. If the body remains tense, do not condemn it. Say, the body has been loyal to the old state, and now I invite it into the new one. If the mind continues to ask how, do not wrestle with it. Say, the bridge is forming. If the old fear returns, do not crown it. Say, this is the old state speaking, and I am moving inwardly now. The question is not whether the old state speaks. It may speak. It has had practice. The question is whether you obey it as final. Tonight, you are learning not to obey fear as action. You are learning not to mistake tension for responsibility. You are learning not to use worry as proof of care. You are learning that the most creative thing you can do before sleep is not to push the world, but to enter the state where the world has already moved. Think of a man in a small boat upon a river at night. The water moves beneath him, but in fear he takes up an oar and strikes the water again and again, believing that by violence he will command the river. He exhausts himself, splashes himself, and calls the struggle movement. But if he understands the current and places his boat in it, the river carries him. The forceful man fights the river because he does not trust its movement. The awakened man enters the current. Assumption is entering the current. Force is striking the water. The law is the current. The state is the direction. The answer is the shore already chosen in consciousness. Tonight, stop striking the water. Let the current take the seed. Let the law carry what you have assumed. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. This sentence is a release from false action. It does not say, I never move. It says, I do not move from fear. It does not say, I do nothing. It says, I do not make panic my guide. It does not say, I ignore the world. It says, I return to cause before I meet the world. It does not say, the problem is unimportant. It says, the problem is not Lord. Force often continues, because the mind believes fear is protecting it. But fear rarely protects the imaginal life. Fear repeats the danger inwardly. It paints the wrong picture with great intensity. It hears the wrong words. It enters the wrong scene. It lives from the wrong end. Then the man says, I am only preparing, but he is imagining. He is creating an inner pattern and sleeping in it, and what he sleeps in, the subconscious receives. Suppose the problem concerns a conversation. Force rehearses the argument. It prepares replies. It hears the harsh tone. It anticipates injury. It speaks to the other in imagination as an enemy. It sleeps in conflict and then wonders why conflict remains. Assumption enters the conversation after peace has arrived. It hears the softer word. It feels the tension dissolved. It says, it is settled. It sleeps in harmony, and harmony begins to seek its form. Suppose the problem concerns a road that seems closed. Force stands before the closed road and says, open, 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 but all the while feels closed in. It repeats the image of obstruction. It sleeps before the barrier. Assumption enters the state where the road is already open. It feels movement. It feels relief. It says, the way is opening. It sleeps in passage, and passage begins to form. Suppose the problem concerns waiting. Force counts time. It names every hour as evidence against the desire. It says, still not here, still not answered, still not moved. It sleeps in delay. Assumption says, the bridge is forming, even when the senses report stillness. It sleeps in quiet movement. And because consciousness has moved, the delay is no longer interpreted as failure. The same outer condition is met differently when the state changes. This is why I say, change the state from which the world is seen. You may look upon the same fact from fear and call it disaster. You may look upon it from the fulfilled state and call it transition. You may look upon the same silence from abandonment and feel rejected. You may look upon it from assurance and feel that the right word is forming. You may look upon the same delay from failure and feel defeated. You may look upon it from completion and feel the bridge arranging itself. The fact has not yet changed, but the meaning has changed. And when meaning changes in consciousness, form must follow. Force tries to change form while preserving the old meaning. Assumption changes meaning, and form obeys. Tonight, you are not preserving the old meaning. You are not letting the problem mean what it used to mean. You are not letting it mean danger, defeat, abandonment, rejection, failure, impossibility, or delay without purpose. You are giving it a new place. You are seeing it from the end. You are letting it become material for the answer. It is handled. This does not mean the old mind understands the handling. The way is opening. This does not mean the senses see the whole road. The bridge is forming. This does not mean you must supervise every incident. The law works. This does not mean nothing is happening. I sleep in the solution. This does not mean I deny the appearance. It means I no longer sleep in it. Let the phrase without force become peaceful to you. Without force does not mean without power. The greatest powers in nature do not appear violent in their deepest operation. A seed breaks the earth without rage. The tide moves without shouting. Dawn dissolves darkness without argument. The heart beats without command from the anxious mind. The law of consciousness is not weak because it is silent. It is silent because it is sure. Force belongs to doubt. Assumption belongs to certainty. Force says, maybe if I press hard enough. Assumption says, it is done in consciousness. Force says, I must hold the problem. Assumption says, I hold the end. Force says, I will not sleep until I see. Assumption says, I sleep because I have seen inwardly. Force says, assumption says, the answer depends on the state I accept. Now, my friend, let us begin to remove force from the body. Not as an exercise, but as a change of meaning. Perhaps the forehead has been tight from thinking. Let it receive the truth. The answer does not come by strain of the brow. Perhaps the jaw has been set as though enduring life. Let it receive the truth. Endurance is not the same as creation. Perhaps the shoulders have been lifted as though. Let them receive the truth. The bridge is not built by your shoulders. Perhaps the chest has been guarded. Let it receive the truth. The answer is already here in consciousness. Perhaps the hands have been gripping. Let them receive the truth. You do not force the way. The body often continues force even when the mind says it is willing to release. So be patient. Speak to the body with the new state. I do not force. Let the jaw loosen. I do not force. Let the shoulders soften. Let the breath widen. I do not force. Let the hands rest. I do not force. Let the problem lose its grip. I do not force, because the answer is not born of fear. I do not force, because the outer world is not the source. I do not force, because the bridge of incidents belongs to the law. I do not force, because I am not trapped in the visible fact. I do not force, because I can move inwardly now. I do not force, because rest is the proof that I have entered. Rest is not the proof that you have given up. Rest is the proof that you have accepted. It is the body saying, I no longer need to fight the shadow. It is the heart saying, the matter is handled in consciousness. It is the mind saying, I will not dig up the seed. It is the self saying, I have entered the state where this is solved. Such rest is powerful. Such rest is creative. Such rest is the Sabbath of the fulfilled desire. In Scripture, the Sabbath is rest from labor. But spiritually understood, it is the rest that follows the imaginal act. It is not idleness before creation. It is rest after the state has been assumed. You enter the end, and then you rest from the old effort. You no longer labor to become. You are. You no longer labor to force. You allow. You no longer labor to persuade the world. You impress the deep and let the world follow. This is the rest you are being guided toward tonight. Not empty sleep, not help. Sleep after assumption. Sleep after entering the answer. Sleep after withdrawing the crown from the problem. Sleep after saying, the answer is already here, and I do not force the way. If the conscious mind tries to return to force, let it return to this phrase, the answer is already here, and I do not force the way. If it says, but I must do something, say, I am doing the first thing. I am changing the state. If it says, but what if nothing? Say, the bridge is forming. If it says, but I need to know how, say, the law knows its own means. If it says, but I cannot rest, say, rest is how I enter the answer. If it says, but the problem is still there, say, the problem is effect, imagination is cause. Do not argue beyond that. Too much argument keeps the surface mind awake. Give the answer and return to rest. Give the answer and return to the state. Give the answer and return to the quiet inward room where the solution already exists. There is a beautiful economy in the law. You do not need to repair every thought by force. You only need to return to the state. You do not need to defeat every fear in combat. You only need to stop marrying I am to fear. You do not need to control every outer movement. You only need to occupy the end. From the end, the necessary movements will come, and they will come with a. This is why forcing the problem is often wasted suffering. It gives you the feeling of doing something while leaving you in the state that reproduces the problem. But assuming the answer may appear quiet, almost too simple, and yet it changes cause. The world of the senses praises visible struggle because it can see it. The world of imagination honors invisible movement because it creates. Tonight, choose invisible movement. Move inwardly from problem to answer. Move inwardly from pressure to relief. Move inwardly from danger to safety. Move inwardly from confusion to guidance. Move inwardly from I must force to the way is opening. Move inwardly from I cannot rest to rest is the proof that I have entered the answer. If the problem has been enthroned, remove it gently. Do not attack it. Do not shout at it. Do not give it another drama. Simply stop giving it your final feeling. Stop placing it at the center before sleep. Stop asking it to define tomorrow. Stop calling it stronger than I am. The problem may appear, but it is not the throne. The throne is consciousness. The throne is I am. The throne is the state selected. I am guided. I am supported. The matter is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I sleep in the solution. Let the state be simple. Let the words be gentle. Let the mind become less interested in solving by pressure. This is not a small shift. It is the difference between servitude and creation. Servitude says, I must wait for the world. Creation says, I enter the state and the world follows. Servitude says, the problem decides my peace. Creation says, my state decides the future of the problem. Perhaps you have forced because you care deeply. I understand. The things that trouble us are often the things that touch the heart. You did not force because you forced because you were afraid. You forced because you wanted relief. You forced because you believed the world must be held together by your hands. But now a greater law is being revealed. You may care without fear. You may desire without strain. You may intend without forcing. You may rest without abandoning the desire. This is a very great freedom, to desire deeply and rest deeply. The unawakened mind thinks these cannot dwell together. It says, if I care, I must be tense. If I want this solved, I must not rest. But the law says, desire fulfilled in imagination brings rest. It says, the deeper the assumption, the more natural the peace. It says, when you have entered the answer, rest is not betrayal, rest is evidence. So let yourself desire the solution without forcing it. Let yourself love the answer without gripping the problem. Let yourself care and still sleep. Let yourself be sincere. Let yourself be devoted and still peaceful. Let yourself be changed inwardly before the outer world reports change. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. Now slowly let the old effort bow out. The effort to control every person. Let it soften. The effort to predict every event. Let it soften. The effort to keep the mind upon the problem in order to feel safe. Let it soften. The effort to make fear useful. The effort to force the solution before entering the solution. Let it soften. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. If the mind says, but I have forced for so long, say, tonight I learn another way. If the heart says, but I am tired, say, then rest is holy tonight. If the body says, but I am used to holding, say, the burden is lifted. If the old state says, you must continue, say, you do not need to push the world tonight. You do not need to push a person, push a road, push a decision, push a circumstance, push a door, or push the future. You do not need to push the senses into agreement. You do not need to push the mind into violent belief. You need only change the state from which the world is seen. See the problem now from the answer. See the difficulty now from relief. See the delay now from completion. See the silence now from assurance. See the conflict now from peace. See the uncertainty now from guidance. See the burden now from the feeling that it is handled. This is the inward movement. This is the true action before sleep. This is the end of force and the beginning of assumption. The problem does not need more fear from you. It does not need another night of tension. It does not need your body to remain awake as its witness. It does not need to be fed by anxious imagining. Tonight, let it starve. Let the answer be fed instead. Feed the answer with attention. Feed the answer with feeling. Feed the answer with sleep. Feed the answer with the quiet conviction that the law works in silence. It is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I sleep in the solution. The words may be few, but the state is great. The state says, I am no longer before the answer. I am in the answer. The state says, I am no longer trying to conquer the problem as though it were cause. I have returned to cause. The state says, I am no longer making fear my action. I am making assumption my action. The state says, I rest, and my rest is creative. Now, let the final understanding of this section settle gently. Force keeps the problem alive because force often contains the belief that the problem is alive with power. Assumption dissolves the problem because assumption withdraws that belief and gives life to the answer. Force stays in the old world and pushes. Assumption enters the new world and rests. Force says, I am trapped until the world moves. Assumption says, I move inwardly first and the world follows. Tonight, you do not need to push the world. You need to change the state from which the world is seen. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. The way is opening, the bridge is forming. The law works in silence. I sleep in the solution. And as you sleep in the solution, the problem begins to lose the life that force once gave it. Now, my friend, we must learn to distinguish between two inner dwelling places. One is the state of the problem, and the other is the state of the answer. They may exist in the same man, in the same hour, even while the outer circumstance appears unchanged. Yet they are two different. They are not merely two opinions. They are not merely two moods passing across the surface of the mind. They are two states of consciousness, and the state you occupy is the instruction you give to life. The state of the problem has a certain atmosphere. You know it perhaps before you can name it. It is tension. It is argument. It is the mind speaking to itself with no conclusion. It is the heart leaning toward tomorrow and fearing what tomorrow may bring. It is waiting, but not the quiet waiting of faith. It is waiting with a clenched hand. It is replaying what was said, what was not said, what should have happened, what might happen, what could go wrong, what must be prevented, what must be forced, what must be controlled. It is a room filled with questions, and every question seems to breed another. The state of the problem says, what if? It says it softly at first, then again and again. What if it does not change? What if the answer never comes? What if the door remains closed? What if I have lost my chance? What if they do not return? What if the money does not arrive? What if the decision goes against me? What if tomorrow brings more of the same? And with each what if, the body tightens a little more, the mind becomes more watchful, the problem becomes more enthroned, and sleep is delayed because the self has not yet left the question. The state of the answer says, it is handled, not with noise, not with false excitement, not with a denial of what has appeared. It says it with the quietness of one who has moved inwardly. It is handled. The matter is no longer being carried in the old way. The burden has lost its lordship. The answer exists in consciousness, and I am entering it now. It is handled. The body hears this and begins to soften. The mind hears this and begins to stop circling. The heart hears this and begins. The state of the problem says, there is no way. It looks upon the outer circumstance as final. It sees the gate and calls it destiny. It sees the silence and calls it rejection. It sees the delay and calls it failure. It sees the pressure and calls it danger. It sees one road closed and concludes that all roads are closed. It says there is no way because it is looking from the valley of the problem, where the horizon is small and the air is heavy. The state of the answer says the way is forming. It does not need to see every step. It does not require the entire road to be revealed before it enters rest. It knows that the bridge of incidents is often invisible at first. It knows that what appears motionless may be rearranging beneath the surface. It knows that people, moments, words, impulses, delays, openings, and changes may gather in ways the conscious mind could not have planned. The way is forming. This sentence does not force the road. It permits the road to appear. The state of the problem says, I must force it. It thinks force is power. It thinks anxiety is care. It thinks worry is loyalty. It thinks the problem must be held tightly or it will not be solved. It says, I must force it, because it still believes the answer is far away and unwilling. It treats life as though life must be dragged into obedience. It treats the outer world as the state of the answer says, the law works in silence. It understands that silence is not absence. It understands that the unseen is not empty. It understands that the deep mind receives the state, and life follows the state in a way that may not announce itself at once. The law works in silence. This is not passivity. It is trust in the order of creation. It is the end of disturbing the seed. It is the willingness to sleep in the answer before the senses have finished reporting the old story. Now these two states may both speak within you. This is why you must learn their voices. The state of the problem speaks with pressure. The state of the answer speaks with relief. The state of the problem leans forward. The state of the answer rests inwardly. The state of the problem demands proof before peace. The state of the answer enters peace and lets proof follow. The state of the problem says, I am separate from the solution. The state of the answer says, the solution is already mine in consciousness. A person cannot sleep in the problem and expect to awaken in the answer. This must be understood without harshness. I do not say it to frighten you. I say it to restore your authority. If you fall asleep rehearsing the problem, you have given the subconscious the problem as the final instruction. If you fall asleep imagining the worst, asking how, asking when, feeling trapped, feeling abandoned by the answer, then the deep mind receives that state and continues its pattern. But if you fall asleep in the answer, even gently, even imperfectly, even with only a little relief, you have given the subconscious another instruction. Sleep receives the state you carry into it. Sleep receives the mood beneath your words. Sleep receives the inward dwelling place. Sleep receives the room in which consciousness rests. Therefore, before sleep, you must change rooms. Do not stay in the room of the problem and merely decorate it with hopeful words. Do not remain in the old chamber of fear while saying it is done, as though the words alone could make the chamber different. Move inwardly. Leave the room where the problem is king. Enter the room where the answer is already accepted. This movement is subtle, but it is real. It is the movement from one state to another. The state of the problem feels narrow. It makes the future seem smaller than the present fear. It says, this is all there is. This is what must happen. This is what cannot be changed. It reduces life to the size of one appearance. It makes imagination serve anxiety. It makes memory repeat itself as prophecy. It makes the mind use the past as a prison. and call it reason. The state of the answer feels spacious. It does not need to know everything because it has entered the end. It does not deny that the problem appeared, but it refuses to make the appearance final. It allows the unseen to work. It allows the bridge to form. It allows the body to rest before the outer arrangement is complete. It says, there is more than what I see. There is a solution in imagination. There is a path from this state to its visible expression. The state of the problem replays the old scene. It hears again the words that wounded, the silence that frightened, the letter that disturbed, the moment that failed, the sign that seemed to prove loss. It turns memory into a nightly theater and sits before the same drama. And because it watches the same drama with feeling, it gives that drama another night of life. The state of the answer does not keep attending the old performance. It revises, it replaces, it enters another scene. It hears the words as they ought to have been spoken. It feels the matter after it has been settled. It imagines the end, not the wound. It does not deny that the old scene was experienced. It refuses to make the old scene the final creative image before sleep. It says, I will not give my night to that which I do not wish to continue. The state of the problem is filled with unfinished conversations. It speaks inwardly to people who are not present. It argues with them. It defends itself. It pleads. It anticipates their rejection. It becomes exhausted by conversations that never occurred in the outer world, but have occurred many times in imagination. And imagination, being creative, does not treat them as nothing. The state of the answer ends the argument. It hears a different word. It hears peace. It hears, it is settled. It hears, all is well. It hears, the matter is resolved. It hears, you are understood. It hears, the way is over. It hears what would be heard after the answer had come. And by hearing from the end, it begins to create the end. The problem says, what if? The answer says, it is handled. The problem says, there is no way. The answer says, the way is forming. The problem says, I must force it. The answer says, the law works in silence. The problem says, I am trapped. The answer says, I move inwardly now. The problem says, I cannot rest. The answer says, rest is the sign that I have entered the end. The problem says, look at what happened. The answer says, imagine what ought to be. The problem says, the past is fixed. The answer says, revision is mercy. The problem says, nothing is changing. The answer says, the seed is underground. Let these contrasts become familiar, for they teach you how to recognize where you are dwelling. The outer world may not yet tell you where you dwell. The body will often tell you. The breath will tell you. The heart will tell you. The quality of your inner speech will tell you. The problem state has a tone. The answer state has another tone. In the problem state, the breath often feels watched. It does not move freely. It is as though the body is listening for danger. The shoulders may lift. The jaw may become fixed. The forehead may tighten. The hands may grip. The stomach may close. The mind may leap from one thought to another, never arriving, always circling. This is the body of the problem, not because the body is wrong, but because it has been trained by the old state. In the answer state, there is a softening. It may be small at first. Do not despise it. The shoulders may lower slightly. The jaw may loosen. The breath may widen. The chest may open a little. The hands may rest. The forehead may smooth. The heart may no longer feel as if it is running ahead into tomorrow. This is the body beginning to occupy the answer. It is not dramatic, perhaps, but it is creative. The state of the answer is not always ecstasy. Often it is quiet certainty. It is the feeling, this is handled. It is the feeling, I do not need to know the whole road. It is the feeling, I am guided. It is the feeling, the law is working where I cannot see. It is the feeling, this quiet feeling is powerful because it is close to naturalness. And what feels natural to consciousness becomes visible in experience. Do not think you must produce a grand emotion tonight. A grand emotion may wake the mind. It may turn the practice into performance. For sleep, the answer state is often gentle. Relief, trust, a little space, a little exhale, a sense that the old pressure no longer defines you, a sense that the problem is no longer, a sense that something wiser than surface thought is arranging the way. The problem state wants intensity. It says, if I am not intense, I do not care. But the answer state knows that peace can care more deeply than panic. It knows that stillness can be more faithful than worry. It knows that rest can be more creative than fear. It knows that the heart does not need to suffer in order to love the solution. It knows that one may desire sincerely and still sleep. This is an important freedom. You can desire the answer and still rest. You can care about the outcome and still stop wrestling. You can be sincere and still be soft. You can be devoted to the fulfilled state without forcing the bridge. The problem state has taught you that care must ache. The answer state teaches you that care may become assumption. The state of the problem imagines worst outcomes. It may call this preparation. It says, I must imagine the worst so that I. But imagination does not become harmless because you call it preparation. If you enter the worst with feeling, you have entered a creative image. If you sleep in it, you have planted it. If you repeat it, you have strengthened it. The mind may think it is protecting you, but it is often building the very atmosphere it fears. The state of the answer imagines the fulfilled outcome, not always in great detail, sometimes only through a small scene, a small word, a small bodily release. It does not rehearse disaster in order to feel prepared. It rehearses fulfillment in order to become transformed. It says, I will not spend my night creating what I do not want. I will enter the end that I choose. The problem asks, how? The answer says, the bridge is forming. The problem asks, when? The answer says, the appointed way is moving. The problem asks, through whom? The answer says, the law knows its instrument. The problem asks, what if it fails? The answer says, I do not enter failure before sleep. The problem asks, what if nothing changes? The answer says, I change the state, and the world follows. This does not mean questions never appear. They may appear. Let them pass. Do not build a house for them. Do not invite them to sleep with you. A question may knock at the door of the mind, but you need not open and serve it supper. You may answer gently. How? The bridge is forming. When? The seed knows its season. Through whom? The law knows the means. Will it work? I sleep in the answer. What if? It is handled. This gentle answering is not intellectual debate. It is redirection. It is the shepherd bringing the wandering sheep back to the fold. The mind wanders into the problem. You guide it back to the answer. It wanders into the old scene. You guide it back to the fulfilled scene. You guide it back to relief. Every return matters. Every return says, this is where I now dwell. The state carried into sleep is an instruction to the subconscious. Think of the subconscious as a faithful servant waiting at the threshold of sleep. It does not argue with your command. It receives the final impression. If that impression is problem, it works upon problem. If that impression is answer, it works upon answer. It does not ask whether the impression is. It asks only what has been accepted. So tonight, do not give the faithful servant an instruction you do not wish to meet again. Do not hand it fear and ask for peace. Do not hand it conflict and ask for harmony. Do not hand it pressure and ask for relief. Do not hand it the old scene and ask for the new life. Hand it the answer. Hand it the feeling of completion. Hand it the imaginal act of things as they ought to be. Hand it the relief that would be yours if it is handled. This is an instruction. The way is forming. This is an instruction. The bridge is forming. This is an instruction. The law works in silence. This is an instruction. I sleep in the solution. This is an instruction. The problem state is not your enemy in a personal sense. It is simply a state. It has its thoughts, its feelings, its bodily habits, its predictions, its speech, its memories, its reactions. If you occupy it, if you leave it, you begin to experience another. Do not hate the problem state. Hatred keeps you related to it. Simply recognize it and move. You might say inwardly, this is the state of the problem. This is the old tension. This is the old argument. This is the old waiting. This is the old replaying. This is the old imagining of outcomes I do not desire. I see it, I do not condemn it, but I do not sleep in it tonight. Then turn. Turn to the answer. Turn to the feeling after the matter is settled. Turn to the scene that implies completion. Turn to the body that is no longer bracing. Turn to the breath that is no longer afraid. Turn to the mind that no longer rehearses the old story. Turn to the quiet certainty that says it is handled. This turning is the work, not force, not strain. Turning, a change of inner direction. The problem state looks one way. The answer state looks another. When the crate is but stoikos. The problem state looks one way. The answer state looks another. The problem state looks at appearances as master. The answer state looks from imagination as cause. The problem state looks from the wound. The answer state looks from the fulfilled desire. The problem state asks the mirror to change. The answer state changes the face before the mirror. Now let us make the difference very plain in feeling. The problem says, the answer says, I have planted the seed. The problem says, I must understand everything. The answer says, understanding will come from the bridge. The problem says, I must protect myself by fear. The answer says, I am protected by the state I occupy. The problem says, this is too much. The answer says, the burden is lifted. If you feel the old state return, do not panic. The return of an old state is not a prophecy. It is only a habit asking to be worn again. You may decline. You may say, no, not tonight. I know you. You are the old room. I am leaving you. Then return to the answer. It is handled. The way is forming. The bridge is forming. I do. But if he continues walking into the new room becomes familiar. So it is with states. The answer state may feel unfamiliar at first because the problem state has been rehearsed. Do not take unfamiliarity as falsehood. The new state may be strange only because it is new. Wear it gently, and it will become natural. The state of the answer must become a little place of rest. If the phrase "it is handled" gives you a small place to rest, enter there. If the phrase "the way is forming" gives the mind permission to stop forcing, enter there. If the phrase "I sleep in the solution" gives the body permission to soften, enter there. The entrance may be small, but it is entrance. The answer state is not it can be touched now by asking, how would I feel if the matter were already settled? Not how would I feel when I force the answer? Not how would I feel while begging life to change? But how would I feel after the word has come, after the door has opened, after the pressure has lifted, after the problem has lost its name, after the body exhales, after says, it is done, before says, can I be safe? After says, I am safe. Before says, where is the way? After says, the way has opened. Before says, I must force it. After says, the law has arranged it. Before says, I cannot sleep. After says, I sleep in peace. You are not waiting for you can move from before to after while the night is still around you. You can move from problem to answer before the senses announce the journey. This movement is the true beginning of change. And when you sleep from after, the subconscious receives after. It receives completion. It receives relief. It receives the solved state. It receives the new identity. It receives a command. And because the subconscious is faithful, because imagination is creative, because the outer follows the inner, the bridge begins. Perhaps not in the way the old mind expected. Perhaps not through the road you had insisted upon. The answer may come naturally, quietly, through a turn, through another person, through a thought, through timing, through a revised relationship, through a change. But that is not your concern before sleep. Your concern is the state. The problem state asks for details because it does not trust the law. The answer state rests because it has accepted the end. The problem state tries to supervise the bridge. The answer state lets the bridge form. The problem state clings to appearances. The answer state lives from imagination. The answer state says, I release myself in consciousness and the world follows. Now let the words become slower, more suitable for the night. The problem says, what if? The answer says, it is handled. The problem says, there is no way. The answer says, the way is forming. The problem says, I must force it. The problem says, I cannot rest. The answer says, I sleep in the solution. Again, the problem says, what if? The answer says, it is handled. The problem says, there is no way. The answer says, the way is forming. The problem says, I must force it. The answer says, the law works in silence. Let the new room become easier to enter. There is no need to hate the question. There is only the need to stop sleeping in it. There is no need to hate the delay. There is only the need to stop calling it failure. There is no need to hate the fear. There is only the need to stop making it your identity. There is no need to hate the problem. There is only the need to move into the I do not sleep in argument. I sleep in quiet certainty. I do not sleep in waiting. I sleep in completion. I do not sleep in force. I sleep in the law. I do not sleep as one separate from the solution. I sleep as one already in the solution. This is the change of state. It may begin as words, but let it become feeling. Let the feeling be. You are learning now to move from the problem state into the answer state before sleep. You are learning to recognize the problem state by its tension, its argument, its waiting, its replaying, its worst outcomes, its how and when, its trapped feeling, its sense of separation from the solution. You are learning to recognize the answer state by its relief, its quiet certainty, its openness, its sense of being guided, its feeling that the matter is handled, its softening of the body, its end of the old rehearsal. And now, gently, you choose, not with force, not with strain, not with fear. You choose the answer state. The problem says, I must force it. The answer says, the law works in silence. And tonight before sleep, you will learn to move from the problem state into the answer state. Now, my friend, we must come to the sacred center of the matter. We have spoken of the problem. We have seen that the problem is not the true cause. We have seen that force often keeps the problem alive. But now we must go deeper still, beneath the problem, beneath the fear, beneath the outer fact, beneath the name you have given to the difficulty. We must come to I am, for I am is never the problem. Before you say I am stuck, there is I am. Before you say I am afraid, there is I am. Before you say I am rejected, before you say I am waiting, there is I am. Before you say I am unable to fix this, there is I am. And the mistake of man is not that he has problems in the world. The mistake is that he joins the sacred name of being to the problem and then wonders why the problem seems to have life. I am is the throne. The problem has no right to sit upon that throne unless consciousness places it there. And yet, without knowing it, men place the problem there many times a day. They do it in thought. They do it in feeling. They do it in the way the body tightens. They do it in the way they tell the story inwardly. They do it in the last identity they wear before sleep. A man does not. The first is an observation of an appearance. The second is a command. A woman does not merely say, there is uncertainty before me. She says, I am afraid. The first leaves room for movement. The second places fear upon the throne of I am. Another does not merely say, there has been silence. He says, I am rejected. And suddenly silence becomes identity. This is why you must be watchful tonight, but watchful gently. Do not watch yourself with criticism. Watch yourself with awakening. When you hear an inward phrase beginning with I am, listen carefully to what follows. For what follows I am is not a small matter. It is not casual. It is not merely descriptive once accepted. It is creative. It is a state being chosen, sometimes unconsciously, sometimes by habit, sometimes through fear, sometimes through memory, but chosen nonetheless by the attention and feeling given to it. I am stuck. That is not neutral if you wear it as self. I am afraid. That is not neutral if you sleep in it. I am rejected. That is not neutral if you. I am waiting. That is not neutral if it becomes the state in which you live. I am unable to fix this. That is not neutral if it becomes the final instruction before sleep. These sentences may appear to be only descriptions, but when they are felt as self, they become commands. They instruct the subconscious. They tell the deeper mind, this is who I am, this is and the subconscious, faithful to the accepted state, begins to clothe the world in the likeness of that inner name. This is not said to condemn you. Let that be repeated softly. This is not said to condemn you. Perhaps you have said, I am stuck, because the way truly appeared closed. Perhaps you have said, I am afraid, because the heart had carried too much. Perhaps you have said, I am behind, because time seemed to pass and the answer seemed delayed. Perhaps you have said, I am helpless, because you had exhausted every outer method. I do not condemn the feeling. I only show you that the feeling need not be married to I am. You are not the state that has troubled you. You are the awareness that has occupied it. You are the one who may remove the garment. You are not the problem. You are the consciousness in which the answer is born. Let that sentence come near you slowly. I am not the problem. I am the consciousness in which the answer is born. Again, I am not the problem. I am the consciousness in which the answer is born. If you could feel the truth of that even a little, it seems so powerful because you called it me. You said I am stuck, and the stuckness gained a body. You said I am afraid, and fear gained a throne. You said I am helpless, and helplessness became a world. But when I am is withdrawn from the problem the problem begins to lose the life you unknowingly gave it. Do not fight the problem tonight. Do not argue with helplessness. Withdraw I am from it. Do not sleep as the one who is waiting. Withdraw I am from waiting. This is quiet work. It is subtle work. It is powerful work. It is not the work of the fists. It is the work of identity. A man may change many outer things and still remain inwardly the one who is stuck. Then new circumstances will wear the old. But if he changes the I am, if he removes the sacred name from stuckness and gives it to guidance, the entire inner government changes. And when the government changes within, the outer kingdom cannot remain forever the same. So now let the new identity begin. Not as slogans, not as lines to be shouted against fear, not as pretty words thrown over a wound. Let this be heard. I am guided, not lost, not abandoned in confusion, not required to invent every road by force. I am guided. There is a wisdom deeper than the surface mind. There is an intelligence in imagination that knows the end and forms the bridge. I am guided does not mean I already know every step. It means I am no longer. Let the body hear it. I am supported. Not in the sense that the visible world must instantly prove it before I rest, but in the deeper sense that consciousness, when it enters the fulfilled state, is met by corresponding means. I am supported. The burden is not mine alone. The solution is not borne by my strain. The answer does not depend upon my fear. Let the chest receive that. I am free from this burden, not because the senses have already shown the outer change, but because I am withdrawing identity from the burden. I am free from carrying it as self. I am free from making it my nightly name. I am free from bowing to it before sleep. I may have carried it, but I am not it. I may have felt I am already in the solution. It does not say, I hope to find the solution. It does not say, I will enter it when the world gives me proof. It says, I am already in the solution. That means consciousness has moved. I have left the room of the problem. I have entered the room of the answer. I may not yet see every outer arrangement, but inward, I am the one for whom the way opens. This is not arrogance. It is not pride of the little self. It is the recognition that state determines the road. The way opens for the one who occupies the open way inwardly. The door opens for the one who ceases to live as shut out. The bridge forms for the one who lives from the end. I am the one for whom the way, not I am defeated, not I am waiting, not I am helpless. I am not the problem. I am the consciousness in which the answer is born. The answer is born in me first. The solution takes form in imagination first. The bridge is conceived in the unseen first. Then the outer world must begin to arrange itself as witness. These new phrases are not to be used. Let them go inward. Let them touch the body. Let them become a place to sleep. I am guided. Let the forehead release its need to know everything now. I am supported. Let the shoulders soften. I am free from this burden. Let the chest open. I am already in the solution. Let the breath slow. I am the one for whom the way opens. Let the heart. The old identity may try to return. It may say, but I am stuck. Do not fight it. Simply answer, that was the old name. I am guided. It may say, I am afraid. Answer, fear is a passing state. I am supported. It may say, I am rejected. Answer, that is an old interpretation. I am remembered in the. It may say, I am waiting. Answer, I am already in the solution. This is not argument. This is renaming. The old state has named you long enough. Now I am is being reclaimed. The words I am are like a cup, and whatever you pour into that cup, you drink as life. Pour fear into it, and life tastes of fear. But pour guidance into it, and the world begins to taste of guidance. Pour support into it, and support begins to appear. Pour solution into it, and the problem begins to lose its shape. The cup itself is sacred. Be careful what you place within it. I am is prior to the problem. This is why the problem cannot be your true identity. You existed before the problem. The observer is greater than the observed. The awareness in which the difficulty appears is greater than the difficulty. The consciousness that can imagine the answer is greater than the circumstance that seems to deny it. When you say, I am stuck, you have forgotten that you are the one aware of stuckness. When you say, I am afraid, you have forgotten that you are the one aware of fear. When you say, I am helpless, you have forgotten that you are the one aware of helplessness. The awareness itself is free to move. The awareness itself can select another state. The awareness itself can enter the answer. Therefore, the truth is not, I am the problem. The truth is, I am, and I can assume the solution. Let this be a quiet liberation. I am not rejection. I have interpreted an appearance as rejection, and I can assume remembrance. I am not helpless. I have worn helplessness, and I can assume guidance. I am not waiting. I have lived in waiting, and I can enter the end. I am not unable to fix this. I am the consciousness in which the answer is born. This change of language is not a trick. To say, I am the problem, is to live inside the problem. To say, I am aware of a state I no longer choose, is to step back from it. And once you step back, you can step into another state. This is the art of inner freedom. A man in a dream may believe he is being pursued. While he identifies with the dream entirely, he runs. He needs to awaken to himself as the dreamer. So tonight, do not try to defeat every detail of the problem. Awaken to yourself as the consciousness in which another scene may be created. This is why I say I am is sacred. It is the name of the dreamer. It is the seat of creation. It is the beginning of every state. When I am is given to the problem, the dream the outer scene follows the inward dreamer, not the other way around. Now let us gently remove the old pairings. I am is not stuck. I am is guided. I am is not afraid. I am is supported. I am is not rejected. I am is remembered in the solution. I am is not behind. I am is moving through. Let these sentences not awaken the mind into effort. Let them soothe the mind into identity. The point is not to shout them loudly enough to defeat the old state. The point is to wear them quietly enough that the subconscious receives them as you. You do not need to fight the old identity if you become faithful to the new one. The new identity must be worn into sleep. It is just as a person puts off the garments of the day before entering bed, so must you put off the garment of the problem before entering sleep. Remove I am stuck. Remove I am afraid. Remove I am rejected. Remove I am behind. Remove I am helpless. Remove I am waiting. Remove I am unable to fix this. Lay them down. I am already in the solution. I am the one for whom the way opens. I am not the problem. I am the consciousness in which the answer is born. Wear this slowly. Do not rush. Let the identity settle upon you like night itself. Let the body become accustomed to it. Perhaps at first it feels unfamiliar. That is all right. A new garment may feel strange. The prison may be familiar to the prisoner, yet it is not his home. Fear may be familiar, yet it is not your being. Waiting may be familiar, yet it is not your destiny. I am is free to identify. That is the secret. I am is not bound to the last story. I am is not chained to the last fear. I am is not imprisoned by the last appearance. Do not ask the old state for permission. The old state will say, you cannot leave me. It will show you evidence. It will remind you of yesterday. It will point to the appearance. It will say, see, I am real. But you need not consult the old state. The old state is a former dwelling place, not a judge. You are moving. I am guided. I am supported. I am the consciousness in which the answer is born. Let the mind become quiet around these. Let each one do its work. I am guided. This removes the need to know every step tonight. I am supported. This removes the feeling that the burden is yours alone. I am free from this burden. This removes identification with the weight. I am already in the solution. This removes false identity. I am the consciousness in which the answer is born. This restores power to imagination. Now perhaps you ask, how can I say I am already in the solution when the problem appears unchanged? Because consciousness is not limited to the present appearance. You may move in imagination before you move in fact. In truth, you must. But if you enter the state first, fact becomes servant to consciousness. The outer world follows the imaginal occupancy. A man may sit in a chair in a small room and yet in imagination be in the house he desires. If he truly enters that imaginal dwelling, if he thinks from it and not merely of it, if he wears its feeling, then he has moved in the only way that. So too you may lie in this room while the outer problem has not yet reported change, and still you may enter the solution. You may feel from the solved state. You may hear from it. You may rest from it. You may say, it is handled, not as denial, but as imaginal occupancy. The old I am says, I am in the problem. The old I am says, I am under the power of circumstance. The new I am says, circumstance is under the power of consciousness. Let this become soft, not hard. Do not turn it into battle language. It is not a war against circumstance. It is a withdrawal of false authority. It is a return to the source. It is the quiet recognition that the this is why, when the night comes, the wise man does not sleep under the name of the problem. He does not carry, I am stuck, into the deep. He does not carry, I am helpless, into the chamber of the subconscious. He does not give the final holy words to fear. He chooses the name he will wear into sleep. He chooses the state from which the bridge will form. I am the one for whom the way opens. I am not the problem. I am the consciousness in which the answer is born. Let that be the name. Let the old name grow faint. Let the old name become a sound heard from far away. Let the new name become near, warm, believable enough to rest in. The subconscious does not require you to win a debate. Let it quiet the old urge to force. Let it remove the problem from the center. Let it bring the answer into the center. I am guided, there is a path. I am supported, I am not alone. I am free from this burden. It is not my identity. I am already in the solution. I do not wait outside it. I am the one for whom the way opens. If sleep approaches while these words are near, let sleep come. Do not pull yourself back to make the phrases perfect. Perfection is not required. Identity is required. Feeling is required. Acceptance is required. If the words blur and only the feeling remains, let the feeling remain. If I am guided becomes only a sense of guidance, if I am free from this burden becomes one small exhale, that is good. The subconscious receives impression. The problem wants you to remain awake as its witness. The answer invites you to sleep as its inhabitant. Choose the answer. Choose the identity that belongs to the solution. Choose the I am that does not carry the burden. Choose the I am that no longer. You are not the silence. You are not the conflict. You are not the pressure. You are not the fear. You are not the old scene. You are not the waiting. You are the awareness that can enter the answer. You are the consciousness in which the answer is born. And this answer, once born in consciousness, must seek its body in the world. So tonight, withdraw I am from the problem. Withdraw it from stuckness and give it to guidance. Withdraw it from fear and give it to support. Withdraw it from burden and give it to freedom. Withdraw it from waiting and give it to the solution. Withdraw it from obstruction and give it to the opening way. The solution begins when I am is withdrawn from the problem. Let that be the final understanding here. The solution begins when I am is withdrawn from the problem. Again, softly. The solution begins when I am is withdrawn from the problem. And now I am is guided. I am is supported. I am is free. I am is in the solution. I am is the one for whom the way opens. I am is not the problem. I am is the consciousness in which the answer is born. Now, my friend, listen quietly, for this is where the mind often makes its mistake. It believes the answer must be manufactured by panic. It believes that if it thinks hard enough, worries deeply enough, searches long enough, and exhausts itself completely, then perhaps an answer will be born. But panic does not create the answer. Panic belongs to the state of the problem. Panic runs in circles inside the question and calls its movement progress. Panic is the mind trying to find water while refusing to leave the desert of fear. The answer is not created by panic. The answer already exists as a state in imagination. This must be received gently. Do not strain to understand it. Let it settle. The answer already exists as a state in imagination. There is a state in which the matter is solved. There is a state in which the burden is lifted. There is a state in which the door has opened. There is a state in which the word has been spoken. The pressure has dissolved. The way has appeared, and you are no longer looking at the problem from the side of lack. That state exists now, not tomorrow only, not after the outer world gives evidence. Now, your work is not to invent the answer out of fear. Your work is to enter the answer. If you stand outside a house and look at its windows, you may speak about the house, wonder about the house, describe the house, desire the house, long for the house, and still be outside it. But if you enter it, everything changes. You no longer think of the house as something distant. You think from within it. You see from its windows. You rest beneath its roof. You belong to its atmosphere. So it is with the answer. To think of the answer is one thing. To think from the answer, the first may keep it away. The second gives it life. The senses will say, but where is it? The senses will ask for proof. The senses will show you what appears unchanged. They will point to the letter not yet received, the road not yet opened, the person not yet softened, the pressure not yet removed, the condition not yet rearranged. They will say this is reality. But I tell you, the senses report only what has already taken form. They report the past, even when they seem to speak of the present. They are witnesses of what has been accepted before. They are not the creators of what shall be. Imagination selects the future. The senses report what consciousness has already clothed. Imagination chooses what consciousness will clothe next. The senses are messengers. Imagination is king. The senses tell you of yesterday's state made visible. Imagination lets you enter tomorrow's state now. If you give all authority to the senses, you remain bound to the harvest of former planting. But if you enter imagination as spiritual reality, you plant anew. Imagination is not fantasy. This is where men err. They call imagination unreal because it is not yet seen. They say it is only imagination, as though they had dismissed it, but they do not know what they are dismissing. Imagination is not the idle wandering of the mind. Imagination, when occupied with feeling, is spiritual sensation. It is the reality from which the world of sense is born. What you call fact was once imaginal activity. What you call circumstance was once accepted state. What you call the outer world is imagination hardened into form. Therefore, the unseen answer is no less real because the senses do not yet report it. The seed is not unreal because the tree is not yet visible. The road is not unreal because the traveler has not yet reached it. The answer in imagination is not unreal because your eyes have not seen its garment. It exists as state. And states, when occupied, move toward expression. Do not ask panic to reveal this. Panic cannot see it. Panic is blind except to danger. Panic looks at the seed and says there is no tree. Panic looks at the silence and says there is no word. Panic looks at the delay and Panic looks at the closed door and says there is no entrance. But imagination looks from the end and says the tree is in the seed. The word is in the silence. The movement is in the delay. The entrance is already mine in consciousness. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. Let this become the central quiet of this night. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. It is not here because the senses have agreed. It is here because imagination contains all states, and I may enter the state of the answer now. I do not force the way because the way belongs to the state I occupy. I do not force the way because the bridge of incidents is not built by anxious reasoning. I do not force the way because the conscious mind cannot see all roads. I do not force the way because the law knows how to clothe an accepted state. Now, ask yourself softly, what would be true if this were already solved? Do not hurry. Let the question open a quiet door. What would be true if this were already solved? Perhaps you would not be repeating the same argument inwardly. Perhaps you would not be watching tomorrow with dread. Perhaps you would not be bracing yourself before sleep. Perhaps you would no longer feel that every thought must return to the problem. Perhaps the body would lie more heavily upon the bed. Perhaps the breath would deepen. Perhaps the hands would open. Perhaps the heart would feel less pursued. Perhaps the mind would have nothing urgent to defend. What would be true if this were already solved? Perhaps you would say, thank God, that is over. Perhaps you would say, it worked out. Perhaps you would say, I did not need to force it. Perhaps you would say, the way opened after all. Perhaps you would say, I am free from that burden now. Perhaps you would not say very much at all. Perhaps the deepest sign would simply be silence, but a new silence, not the silence of fear, but the silence of completion. How would the body feel? Would the shoulders still be lifted? Would the jaw still be fixed? Would the eyes still be restless behind closed lids? Would the chest still carry the old pressure? Would the stomach still tighten as though danger were near? Or would the body begin to say, I am safe now, the matter is handled, I no longer need to guard the problem? The body is often the last servant of the old state, and yet it can be gently taught the new one. Let the body feel, even faintly, how it would feel after the answer, after the solution, after the good word, after the opened way, after the burden is lifted, after the problem loses its name. Let the body taste after, not before. Before is where panic lives. After is where assumption rests. How would the mind feel if this? It would stop arranging imaginary disasters. It would stop rehearsing speeches that may never need to be spoken. It would stop asking the same question in 10 different forms. It would stop searching every shadow for a sign. It would stop treating fear as wisdom. It would stop using the night as a court where the problem is tried again and again. The mind in the solved state does not need to become empty by force. It becomes quiet because the central pressure has been removed. What would you no longer fear? Would you still fear that there is no way? Would you still fear that you are alone? Would you still fear that time is against you? Would you still fear that another person holds your destiny? Would you still fear that one event has the final word? Would you still fear that what appears now must remain? Or would the fear lose its argument because you have entered the state beyond it? Fear belongs to the state before the answer. It feeds on separation from the answer. It says, I am here, and the solution is elsewhere. But the moment you enter the solution in imagination, fear begins to lose its food. It may still echo, but it is no longer central. It may still knock, but it is no longer master. It may still speak, but its words come from the old state. What would you say softly to yourself if this were already solved? You might say, it is handled. You might say, I am guided. You might say, I am free now. You might say, thank God it is done. You might say, I knew it would work out. You might say, I did not need to force the way. Choose the phrase that belongs to the after. Do not choose the phrase that belongs to struggle. Do not say it as one begging. Say it as one remembering. Say it as one who has received the report from the end. Say it as one who has entered the... Thy answer is already here, and I do not force the way. Again, thy answer is already here, and I do not force the way. This phrase contains both power and rest. Thy answer is already here. That is power. I do not force the way. That is rest. Power without rest becomes strain. Rest without power becomes sleep without creation. But power joined to rest is assumption. It is the Sabbath of the fulfilled state. Let this phrase become slower now. The answer is already here. Let the mind stop searching outside, and I do not force the way. Let the body stop gripping. The answer is already here. Let the heart stop waiting as though abandoned, and I do not force the way. Let the bridge form unseen. The answer is already here. Let the old problem lose its throne, and I do not force the way. Let imagination become cause again. You are... That says words while still bowing to fear. It tries to cover the problem without changing the state. It is nervous. It must repeat itself loudly because it does not believe itself. That is not what I am asking of you. I am not asking you to paint a smile over anxiety. I am asking you to enter a state. The imaginal state is not false comfort. It is the birthplace of fact. When you enter the state of the answer, you are not lying to yourself. You are moving into the creative source before the outer world has caught up. You are not denying the senses in a childish way. You are refusing to let the senses be the final authority. You are not pretending the problem never appeared. You are choosing the state in which the problem is already solved. This is not false. It is causative. A man who warms himself by a fire before the room has fully heated is not lying about warmth. He has entered the source from which warmth spreads. A woman who plants seed before seeing fruit is not lying about harvest. She has entered the order by which harvest comes. So when you enter the answer before the senses report it, you are not lying. You are planting. You are warming yourself at the source. You are giving consciousness the pattern it must express. The old mind says, I must see it first. The awakened imagination says, I must enter it first. The old mind says, when it is solved, I will feel. The awakened imagination says, relief is the state of the solved problem, and I may enter relief now. The old mind says, the answer is absent. The awakened imagination says, the answer exists in imagination, and imagination is spiritual reality. The old mind says, I must force the way. The awakened imagination says, the answer is already here, and I do not force the way. Let the state become more real than the question. This not to solve by thought, not to force by anxiety, not to command the outer world from a place of fear, but to let the answer become inwardly inhabited, to let it feel near, to let it feel possible, then natural, then present, then yours. What would be true if this were already solved? Stay there. How would the body feel? Let it begin. What would the mind stop doing? Let it stop a little. What would you no longer fear? Let that fear lose its claim. Say it now. It is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. I am guided. I am supported. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. If the mind protests, let it protest quietly in the distance. You do not need to answer every protest. The mind has been trained by appearances, and appearances are loud at first, but a deeper part of you recognizes truth. A deeper part of you knows that every fulfilled thing must first be accepted. A deeper part of you knows that imagination is not an escape from life, but the hidden cause of life. The answer already exists in imagination. A peaceful conversation already exists in imagination. A favorable decision already exists in imagination. A lifted burden already exists in imagination. A restored sense of safety already exists in imagination. A clear way already exists in imagination. The self who is no longer troubled already exists. The scene after relief already exists in imagination. The words "it is done" already exist in imagination. Enter them. Do not stand outside them admiring them as possibilities. Enter them. Hear the words from within. Feel the relief from within. Rest in the room after the matter is solved. Let the old world remain outside for now. You are not required to pull the outer world into place with your hands. You are required to live from the state that implies Ambatsus, the answer is already here, and I do not force the way. This is not a request, it is a return. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. This is not begging, it is occupancy. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. This is not a hope thrown into the darkness. It is a state accepted in the deep. The senses may still report the former arrangement. Let them. They are late messengers. You do not need to fight them. You simply do not let them choose your final assumption. You hear their report, and then you return to imagination. You return to the state. You return to the answer. If the senses say nothing has changed, you say the state has changed. If the senses say it is not here, you say it is here in imagination. If the senses say there is no evidence, you say evidence follows assumption. If the senses say force the way, you say the bridge is forming. If the senses say stay in the problem, you say I sleep in the solution. This is not conflict, this is authority. You are not arguing with the senses as though they were enemies. You are placing them in their proper order. They report, they do not rule, they show effects, they do not create cause. They speak of what has been, they do not select what shall be. Imagination, I am selects, and tonight, I am selects the answer. I am selects relief. I am selects guidance. I am selects the opened way. I am selects the solved state. I am selects rest. I am selects the quiet knowledge that the matter is handled. Let that selection become soft enough for sleep. You do not need to know how the answer will dress itself in the world. An accepted state knows how to clothe itself. Men and women will move. Circumstances will shift. Ideas will arise. Paths will open. Timing will arrange. But if you demand to know the means before you enter the state, you have returned to the problem. The bridge is not your first concern. The state is the. The method is not your first concern. The state is the outer evidence is not your first concern. The state is the answer already exists as a state in imagination. Enter the state. Let the state produce its equivalent. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. Let it become a lullaby of causation. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. Let it become the final instruction. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. Let it become the final instruction. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. Let it become the atmosphere in which the body rests. But entering moves within. Panic worships the problem. Entering occupies the answer. Panic says, I must create the solution by pressure. Entering says, the solution exists in imagination, and I choose it. Choose it now. Quietly, not with strain, not with argument, not to impress anyone, not to prove anything to the outer world. Choose it because imagination is cause. Choose it because the senses report the path. Choose it because the answer already exists as a state. Choose it because you can sleep in the answer tonight. The problem does not need another night of panic. It needs a new cause. It needs you to stop breathing life into the old state and begin breathing life into the solved state. It needs you to cease carrying the question as identity and begin carrying the answer as assumption. It needs you to withdraw from the room of fear and enter the room of completion. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. Now, let your inner life become simple. What would be true if this were already solved? I would be at peace. How would the body feel? It would soften. What would the mind stop doing? It would stop circling. What would I no longer fear? I would no longer fear the absence of a way. What would I say softly to myself? It is handled, the way is opening. The answer is already here, and I do not make it complicated. The answer does not require 1,000 images. It requires entrance. It requires occupancy. It requires the feeling that the state is yours. If one phrase gives you relief, use one phrase. If one image gives you the end, use one image. If one breath carries the feeling of the solved state, let that breath be the door. The law is not impressed by complexity. It responds to acceptance. A simple assumption. A small scene entered with feeling is greater than hours of fearful analysis. One moment of true relief before sleep may be more creative than a day of forced mental labor. The deep does not need noise, it needs seed. Tonight, plant the answer. Plant relief, plant guidance, plant completion, plant the opened way, plant the feeling that it is handled. Then let sleep cover the seed. You are not inventing false comfort. You are entering the answer where it truly begins. You are entering the unseen cause before it becomes the seen effect. You are entering the state that life must clothe. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. The matter is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. The law works in silence. I sleep in the solution, and as you enter this state, you are no longer the one who panics before the problem. You are the one who rests in the answer. That rest is not weakness, it is creative power returning to its proper throne. Now, my friend, we come to one of the most tender and powerful moments in the whole mystery of imagining. We come to sleep, not sleep as men commonly think of it, not sleep as mere weariness, not sleep as escape, not sleep as the collapse of the body after the day has spent its strength, but sleep as a chamber of reception. Sleep is the quiet sanctuary where the surface mind lays down its arguments, where the senses loosen their sharp command, where the old world grows dim enough for a new state to be received. During the day, the mind is often in debate. It debates with what it sees, it debates with what it remembers, it debates with what another has said, it debates with the appearance of delay, with the appearance of lack, with the appearance of silence, with the appearance of impossibility. The mind says, but this is here, but this has happened, but this has not changed, but I do not know how, but I do not know when. It argues with the law, because the senses speak loudly in the day. But at night, something merciful begins to happen. The senses soften. The body grows less interested in the outer world. The eyes close, and with them the tyranny of appearances begins to lose its force. The hand no longer reaches for proof. The ears receive less from without and more from within. Thought begins to slow. Reason, which in the day wishes to be king, begins to grow drowsy. And in that sacred weakening of the surface mind, the deeper mind becomes receptive. This is why I have always told you to be careful what you carry into sleep. For the final assumption before sleep does not remain upon the surface. It sinks, it descends beneath the debate. It passes beyond the little arguments of the waking mind and is received by the subconscious as instruction. What you accept as true in this softened state is not merely a thought passing by. It is a seed placed in the dark earth of consciousness. If you fall asleep rehearsing the problem is impressed again. If you fall asleep arguing with the same person, fearing the same outcome, seeing the same closed door, counting the same delay, hearing the same rejection, imagining the same pressure, then the old state is given another night of life. The subconscious does not say, this is unpleasant, I shall reject it. It does not reason in that manner. It receives the mood, it receives the feeling, it receives the image, it receives the final identity, and it begins to build in the likeness of what has been accepted. But if you fall asleep in the answer is impressed. If before sleep claims you, you enter the feeling that the matter is handled. If you hear the words that would be spoken after the solution, if you feel the body after the burden has lifted, if you rest as one no longer bound by the problem, then a new instruction has gone down into the deep. The subconscious receives the solved state. It receives the quiet after the storm. It receives the end, and from the end, it begins to arrange the means. Sleep is not empty. Sleep is not nothing. Sleep is a door, and what you carry to that door passes through. This is why men may wake into the continuation of yesterday, not because yesterday is stronger than God, not because the problem is fixed, but because they carried yesterday into sleep, as though it were tomorrow. They repeated the old feeling until the old feeling became the night's command. They entered bed physically, but imaginatively they remained in the same difficulty. Their body slept, but their consciousness gave the deep mind the old scene. And then they wondered why the morning felt familiar. Tonight you are learning not to do that. Tonight you are learning that the last state is sacred, not the last thought as a passing word only, but the last state, the mood in which you surrender to sleep, the inward home in which you lay down, the identity you accept as your own when the senses are fading. This is the thing that matters, for sleep seals the state. Sleep carries it beneath the surface, beyond argument, beyond effort, beyond correction, into the unseen workshop where the outer world is prepared. The state akin to sleep is the doorway. It is that gentle borderland where you are not fully awake in the ordinary way and yet not entirely lost in sleep. The body begins to feel heavy. The limbs are no longer eager to move. The breath slows of itself. The eyes rest behind the lids. Thoughts become softer at the edges. Reason is still present, but it is no longer sharp as a blade. The facts of the day are still remembered, but they no longer command the same obedience. Imagination grows more. The inner scene becomes easier to feel. The unseen becomes nearer than the seen. Do not hurry past this state. Do not treat it as a meaningless drowsiness. This is a holy threshold. This is where the conscious mind releases its grip, and the subconscious receives the seed. This is where you do not need to force belief with effort. You only need to enter the feeling of the wish fulfilled. You only need to give yourself to the answer. You only need to lie inwardly in the state where the problem is already solved. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. Let that phrase meet the state akin to sleep. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. Let it become slow enough to follow you downward. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. Let it pass beneath argument. When the body becomes heavy, do not say, I must stay awake, and the body is withdrawing from the outer world. Let it withdraw. When the eyes grow still, do not force them toward the old images. Let them rest in the inner answer. When thoughts slow, do not disturb them by calling back every detail of the problem. Let the thoughts become fewer. Let one assumption remain. It is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. I sleep in the solution. The state akin to sleep is not the place. It is not the place to rehearse every fear. It is not the place to ask the problem for another explanation. The surface mind loves explanation because explanation gives it the feeling of control. But before sleep, too much explanation may keep you outside the state. The deep mind does not need an essay. It needs an impression. Give it the impression of relief. Give it the impression of completion. Give it the impression of being guided. Give it the impression of the problem after it has lost its name. Give it the impression of yourself as one who is no longer bound. If the problem has been carried all day, the mind may try to bring it to bed like a familiar companion. It may say, think once more, examine once more, fear once more, prepare once more. But tonight you answer softly, no, the day of force is over. The chamber of reception has opened. I do not bring the problem, and you do not need to bring a complicated answer. You need only bring the state. Perhaps the answer is a single phrase. Perhaps it is handled. Perhaps it is the way is opening. Perhaps it is I am guided. Perhaps it is thank God it is done. Perhaps it is not a phrase at all, but a feeling in the body, a small release in the chest, a quiet loosening of the hands, a breath that says, I no longer carry this. This is enough. Men often imagine that the imaginal act must be dramatic. They think it must be bright, intense, detailed, and perfectly sustained. But before sleep, the deepest work is often very simple. A small scene entered naturally, a quiet word heard inwardly, a feeling of relief accepted, a body that no longer braces, a mind that no longer asks how. These are not small when they are accepted as true. The subconscious receives naturalness. If the mind says, but I cannot see the whole scene, do not force the scene. Feel the result. If the mind says, but I cannot believe it fully, do not wrestle with belief. Enter the mood as best you can. If the mind says, but the problem still appears, let the senses report their old news and return to the inner state. Sleep is not asking you to conquer the senses in argument. It is asking you to give the deeper mind a new instruction before the senses return in the morning. The final assumption before sleep matters because it is a letter sent into the unseen. If the letter says, I am trapped, the unseen receives trapped. If the letter says, I am afraid, the unseen receives fear. If the letter says, I am waiting, the unseen receives waiting. If the letter says nothing is changing, the unseen receives stagnation. But if the letter says it is handled, the unseen receives completion. If the letter says the way is opening, the unseen receives passage. If the letter says I am guided, the unseen receives direction. If the letter says I sleep in the solution, the unseen receives the solved state. You are writing tonight, not with ink, but with feeling. You are sending a message into the depth of yourself, and the depth of yourself is one with the creative power that shapes your world. Therefore, do not write fear as your final letter. Do not send the old problem into the deep once more. Send the answer. Send relief. Send guidance. Send completion. Send the quiet certainty that the law works while you rest. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. This is the letter. It is handled. This is the seal. I sleep in the solution. This is the delivery. There is a reason why the night has always been close to mystery. In the day, men trust their hands. At night, they must trust what they cannot see. In the day, they move objects, speak words, meet people, make arrangements. At night, all that movement stops, and yet life continues. The heart beats, the breath moves, the body repairs, dreams arise, the deep works without the command of the waking mind. If the body can be restored in sleep without your supervision, can the bridge of incidents not also begin in the unseen without your fear? You do not supervise the heart as it beats through the night. You do not command every breath. You do not tell the body how to renew itself. A deeper intelligence works while the conscious mind rests. So also when you give the deeper state, it knows how to arrange corresponding expression. You do not need to remain awake as the engineer of the bridge. You need to fall asleep as the one who has entered the end. This is difficult for the one who has worshipped control. The controlling mind believes that if it sleeps, the problem will rule. But the opposite is often true. The problem rules when you sleep in its state. The answer begins to rule when you sleep in its state. Sleep itself is not the danger. The state carried into sleep is the creative instruction. Therefore, let sleep come, but let it find you in the answer. Imagine, if you can, that sleep is a great quiet hall, and at the entrance of this hall, you must leave one thing behind and carry one thing through. You may leave behind the argument and carry through relief. You may leave behind the fear and carry through guidance. You may leave behind the old scene and carry through the revised end. You may leave behind the question and carry through it is handled. You cannot carry both with equal authority. One must be chosen as final. Choose the answer, not loudly, not desperately, not as one forcing the heavens. Choose the answer as one who has remembered the law. Now, as you approach sleep, the body grows heavier. Let it. The heaviness is not defeat, it is the body entering the chamber. The muscles no longer need to guard the problem. The jaw no longer needs to hold back fear. The hands no longer need to grip the invisible. The eyes no longer need to search. The forehead no longer needs to. The breath no longer needs to be shallow. The heart no longer needs to run ahead. Let the body become a witness to the solved state. The shoulders soften because the burden is lifted. The jaw releases because the argument is over. The breath deepens because the way is opening. The hands rest because there is nothing to force. The eyes remain quiet because imagination sees within. The heart slows because the answer is already here. This bodily softening, the body is agreeing with the state. It is saying, I am no longer in danger as before. I no longer live under the authority of the problem. I am entering the answer. When the body joins the assumption becomes more natural. And when the assumption becomes natural, it descends more deeply into sleep. Do not demand perfection. If only the shoulders soften, let that be enough. If only the breath deepens once, let that be enough. If only the phrase it is handled feels slightly more possible, let that be enough. Seeds are small. The night knows what to do with small seeds. The subconscious does not require a mountain at the beginning. It requires the accepted impression. The state akin to sleep is the garden gate. Bring the right seed to the gate. If you bring the old problem, the garden receives the old seed. If you bring the answer, the garden receives the answer. Tonight, bring the answer. The mind may grow slow now. Let the words become fewer. It is handled. The way is opening. I am guided. I do not force. I sleep in the solution. These words are enough to enter with. You do not need to explain them once you begin to drift. Explanations belong to the surface. The deep understands feeling. Let the words become feeling. Let the feeling become sleep. Let sleep become acceptance. Some may ask, what if I fall asleep before I would tell them, if you fall asleep in the state, the practice has succeeded. Sleep is not an interruption. Sleep is the seal. The purpose is not to remain awake and admire the practice. The purpose is to enter the state and let sleep carry it into the deep. If you fall asleep while feeling that the matter is handled, you have not failed. You have delivered the seed exactly where it belongs. Do not drag yourself back from sleep in order to continue forcing the method. That would be the old habit, returning in spiritual clothing. Let sleep take you. Let the phrase fade. Let the image blur. Let the feeling remain. Let the subconscious receive what the conscious mind no longer needs to supervise. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. If this is the last clear phrase before sleep, it is enough. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. If this sinks with you, let it sink. Let it become part of the descent. Now consider what happens when a man carries the problem into sleep. He may say, I want relief, but he feels the problem as final. He may say, I want the answer, but he sees the difficulty unchanged. He may pray, but his prayer is wrapped in fear. He may affirm, but his body says, no, I am trapped. Then sleep receives the deeper feeling, not the surface desire. The old state descends. The old state, and he wakes with the same inward climate. But when he carries the answer into sleep, even before the senses agree, he changes the inner climate. He may still have a passing fear, but he does not crown it. He may still remember the problem, but he does not enter it as home. He may still not know how, but he rests in the feeling that the way is opening. He gives the subconscious the end. Then sleep becomes creative. Sleep becomes the chamber where the answer is accepted. This word matters, not forced, not argued, not begged. Accepted. You accept the answer as state. You accept relief as state. You accept guidance as state. You accept the opened way as state. You accept it is handled as state. And once accepted, the state begins to seek form. The world you meet tomorrow may not yet show the full harvest. Do not be troubled by that. The seed has its order. The bridge has its movement. The state accepted in sleep may first appear as a change in your own reaction. You may wake less afraid. You may feel an impulse not to repeat the old scene. You may speak differently. You may refrain from a forced action. You may notice an opening. You may receive a thought. You may feel guided to wait or guided to move. These are not small things. They are the early movements of the bridge. But tonight, do not think of tomorrow too much. Tomorrow belongs to the bridge. Tonight belongs to the seed. Tonight, enter the chamber. Tonight, soften the senses. Tonight, stop arguing with appearances. Tonight, allow the subconscious to receive the answer. The body is heavy, the eyes are resting, thought is slower, reason is less sharp, outer facts are less commanding, imagination is more open. This is the threshold. This is the moment when the problem may lose its final hold. This is the moment when the answer may be accepted. Do not use this threshold to rehearse fear. Use it to enter relief. Do not use it to ask how. Use it to say, the bridge is forming. Do not use it to revisit the old scene. Use it to enter the new one. Do not use it to tighten the body. Use it to let the body become the body of the solved state. What would the body feel if the matter were handled? Let it feel that now. What would the mind stop doing if the answer had come? Let it stop now. What would you no longer fear if the way were open? Let the fear loosen now. What would you say softly if the problem had lost its power? Say it now. It is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. I am guided. I sleep in the solution. Now let the rhythm slow. It is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I sleep in the solution. Again, softer. It is handled. The way is... This repetition is not vain. It is the placing of one state where another once stood. It is the gentle training of consciousness. It is the substitution of the answer for the problem. It is not meant to keep you awake. It is meant to carry you down. Let each phrase be like a step descending. It is handled, a step downward. The way is opening. Another step, the bridge is forming. Another step. I do not force. Another step. I sleep in the... Perhaps the conscious mind still wants to know whether this is enough. The very question belongs to the old habit of force. Let it go. Enough is not measured by strain. Enough is measured by acceptance. If you have accepted the answer more than before, something has changed. If you have withdrawn even a little from the problem state, something has changed. If you have given the subconscious a new final mood, something has changed. The change may be quiet, because deep things are often quiet. The seed does not shout underground. The bridge does not announce every beam as it is laid. The dawn does not argue with darkness. The answer does not need to make noise to be real. Sleep receives in silence. The law works in silence. The subconscious builds in silence. Therefore, let silence become your friend tonight. Do not fill it with the old fear. Let silence hold the answer. Let silence carry the assumption. Let silence become the room where the solution is. This is why sleep is so merciful. It asks you to cease striving. It asks the conscious mind to step aside. It asks the senses to rest. It asks the body to trust the unseen. It asks the old self to loosen. And in that loosening, the new state may pass into the deep without struggle. The answer may descend farther than daylight thought could carry it. So tonight, sleep is not escape from the problem. Escape would be running away while still believing the problem. This is assumption. This is not hiding from life. This is returning to cause. This is not denial. This is the acceptance of a higher reality before the lower appearance has changed. This is not weakness. This is the quiet authority of consciousness entering the end. Sleep is the door through which the solution is accepted. Let that be known. Sleep is the door through which the solution is accepted, not the door through which you abandon desire, not the door through which you flee from responsibility, not the door through which the problem is ignored as master, but the door through which the answer is carried into the deep. Tonight, you do not sleep as the one who has no answer. You sleep as the one who has entered the answer. You do not sleep as the one forced by circumstance. You sleep as the one guided by imagination. You do not sleep as the one waiting outside the solution. You sleep as the one already within it. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. The body is heavy, the eyes are resting, thought is slowing, reason is softening, the outer facts are fading, imagination is opening, the answer is being accepted, the burden is being laid down, the bridge is forming, the law works in silence. I sleep in the solution. And tonight, sleep is not escape from the problem. Sleep is the sacred door through which the solution is accepted. Now, my friend, before the bridge can be seen, the burden must be laid down. This is one of the gentlest and yet most difficult things for the anxious mind to understand. Men ask for the bridge while still holding the burden as though the burden were holy. They ask life to open the way while inwardly carrying the old fear, the old scene, the old resentment, the old urgency, the old need to know how, and the old belief that they alone must arrange everything. They pray for movement, but sleep in wait. They ask for freedom, but carry the chain into the night. The bridge of incidents forms from the accepted state. It is not formed by the weight of the burden. The burden is not faith. The burden is not power. The burden is not devotion. The burden is often only the feeling that you alone must solve everything. And while that feeling is enthroned, rest becomes impossible, because the self that believes it must solve all things cannot sleep as one answered. It lies down, but it does not surrender. It closes the eyes, but it continues to hold the world in its hands. Many imagine that if they stop carrying the burden, they have abandoned the desire. But this is not so. To lay down the burden is not to abandon the desire. It is to abandon the fearful manner in which the desire. You may still desire the answer. You may still love the fulfillment. You may still accept the end. But you no longer carry the problem as though your fear were the power that keeps life from falling apart. Fear does not build the bridge. Control does not build the bridge. Old scenes do not build the bridge. Resentment does not build the bridge. Urgency does not build the bridge. The need to know how does not build the bridge. The accepted state builds the bridge. Consider a traveler upon a long road at night. He is weary, yet he wonders why the road is so difficult. On his back he carries a sack full of stones. One stone is fear, another is control, another is the scene he has replayed 100 times, another is resentment toward what happened, another is urgency, another is the need to know how every step will unfold before he will take the next. Another is the belief, if I do not carry this, nothing will happen. And as he walks, he says, why is the road so hard? Why is the journey so heavy? Why does the bridge not appear? But the road is not heavy by itself. The stones are heavy. The night is not cruel by itself. The burden is being carried. The bridge is not absent because life refuses him. He is too occupied with carrying what must be laid down before he can cross. So I say to you tonight, look at the stones you have carried, not with shame, not with blame. Look at them gently as one who has finally become tired enough to be free. Perhaps you have carried fear and called it preparation. Perhaps you have carried control and called it wisdom. Perhaps you have carried old scenes and called it memory. Perhaps you have carried resentment and called it justice. Perhaps you have carried urgency and called it seriousness. Perhaps you have carried the need to know how and called it reason. But all these stones belong to the state of the problem. The answer is lighter. This is how you may know you are entering the answer. Not because the outer world has already arranged itself before your eyes, but because inwardly the weight begins to change. The problem may not yet have reported its disappearance, but the burden is no longer being worn as identity. The old grip loosens. The body begins to believe that it need not carry the whole road. The mind begins to understand that it does not need to supervise the bridge. The heart begins to feel that there is a power in resting from the old state. The burden must be laid down inwardly. Do not wait for the outer world to remove it first. That is the old way. The old way says, when the problem changes, then I will lay down the burden. But the law says, lay down the burden inwardly, and the state that forms the bridge can be received. The burden is not laid down because the world has proved everything. The burden is laid down because you have returned to imagination as cause. The burden is laid down because you no longer believe fear is the builder. I do not carry this tonight. Let that be said softly. I do not carry this tonight. Not tomorrow's whole road, not yesterday's old scene, not every possible outcome, not every person's mind, not every door, not every hour, not every means, not the burden of forcing life to show me how. Let that be heard in the body. I do not solve this by fear. Fear has offered itself as a servant, but it has often behaved as a master. It has told you that without it, you would be careless. It has told you that without it, you would not act. It has told you that without it, the problem would grow stronger. But fear does not solve. Fear repeats. Fear rehearses. Fear imagines loss and calls it caution. Fear tightens the body and calls it readiness. Tonight, I do not supervise the bridge. This is a great release. I do not supervise the bridge. The bridge of incidents is not assembled by your anxious inspection. You do not need to know every person who must move, every word that must be spoken, every thought that must arise in another, every delay that must become useful, every event that must turn. If you try to supervise the bridge before sleeping, you return to the state of the problem. The bridge belongs to the law. The state occupy the state, and the bridge will form in its appointed way. The burden is lifted. Let this not be a shout. Let it be an exhale. The burden is lifted, not because you have abandoned responsibility, but because you have discovered true responsibility. True responsibility is not the endless carrying of fear. True responsibility is the selection of state. True responsibility is the refusal to sleep in the problem. True responsibility is to give the burden is lifted because you no longer join I am to it. The answer is forming. Let this be enough. The answer is forming. It may be forming beyond the reach of your senses. It may be forming in a conversation not yet spoken. It may be forming in the softening of another heart. It may be forming in the timing of an event. It may be forming in an idea that will visit you tomorrow. It may be forming in the removal of an obstruction you cannot see. It may be forming in a quiet reordering of circumstances. You do not need to know where. You only need to know the answer is forming. The old mind may say, but if I lay down the burden, will I not lose control? Yet what control has the burden truly given you? Has it given peace? Has it given clarity? Has it given creative authority? Or has it only made the road feel longer? The burden gives the sensation of control while keeping consciousness in. It gives the feeling of labor without the rest of fulfillment. It keeps the hands busy while the state remains unchanged. Control born from fear says, I must hold every thread. But the law says, enter the end, and the threads will weave. Fear says, if I do not think of every possibility, I am unsafe. But the law says, your safety is in the state you occupy. Urgency says, if I do not force it now, I will lose it. But the law says, what is truly accepted in imagination cannot be withheld by the appearance of delay. Let the stones be placed down one by one. Place down fear. You do not need it tonight. Place down control. You do not need to hold the bridge. Place down the old scene. You do not need to give it another night of life. Place down resentment. You do not need to drink bitterness in order to prove you were wounded. Place down urgency. You do not need panic. Place down the need to know how. You do not need the map before entering the state. Place down the belief that you alone must solve everything. You are not alone in the law. There is a deeper intelligence in imagination than the surface mind can command. There is an order in fulfilled assumption that the waking mind cannot trace beforehand. When you enter the end, life finds means that the old state could not have imagined. When you carry the burden, you limit the road to what. When you lay it down, the unseen is allowed to move. The burden says, I must know how before I rest. The answer says, I rest, and the how is revealed by the bridge. The burden says, I must carry this to prove I care. The answer says, I care enough to enter the fulfilled state. The burden says, if I stop worrying, nothing will happen. The answer says, the law works while I sleep. The burden says, The burden says, this is mine to force. The answer says, this is handled in consciousness. There is a peculiar pride in burden, and it must be seen gently. The little self sometimes loves to feel that everything depends upon its strain. It says, I am the one holding everything together. But what if the holding together is exactly the state that must be left? What if the true power is not in holding the old arrangement, but in entering the new one? What if life does not ask you to carry the stones across the bridge, but to lay them down before the bridge appears? The bridge is not built for the old burdened self. The bridge appears to the one who has entered the end. This does not mean you will never act. I repeat this because the anxious mind may misunderstand. You may act tomorrow. You may speak when speech is given. You may write when writing is right. You may move when movement is natural. You may decide from clarity. But tonight, you do not act from burden. Tonight, you do not rehearse action from fear. Tonight, you do not use the bed as a battlefield. Tonight, you lay the burden down so that the state of the answer may be impressed. I do not carry this tonight. Say it as one setting a stone upon the earth. I do not solve this by fear. Say it as one refusing an old false helper. I do not supervise the bridge. Say it as one refusing an old false helper. I do not supervise the bridge. The answer is forming. Say it as one who can sleep. Perhaps you have carried the burden for so long that laying it down feels strange. The body may ask, where is the weight? The mind may ask, what shall I do if I am not worrying? The heart may feel exposed without its old guard. Be patient. The new lightness may feel unfamiliar, but unfamiliar does not mean unsafe. Sometimes peace feels strange to the one who has known only strain. Sometimes rest feels irresponsible to the one who has worshipped effort. But peace is not irresponsibility when it follows assumption. Rest is not neglect when it comes from the fulfilled state. Let the body learn a new responsibility. The responsibility to soften. The responsibility to receive. The responsibility to stop carrying what belongs to the old state. The responsibility to sleep as the one answered. The shoulders may have thought they were necessary to the solution. Let them soften. The jaw may have thought it must remain firm to prove strength. It need not. Let it loosen. The chest may have held the burden as though guarding life itself. Let it open. The hands may have gripped invisible threads. Let them rest. The forehead may have strained to see the bridge. Let it become smooth. The breath may have remained shallow, as though danger were near. Let it deepen. The body can lay down the burden before the mind fully understands how. The body can be taught the solved state through release. And as the body releases, the mind receives evidence from within that another state is possible. The release itself becomes a doorway. I do not carry this tonight. Let the shoulders answer. I do not solve this by fear. Let the breath answer. I do not supervise the bridge. Let the hands answer. The burden is lifted. Let the chest answer. The answer is forming. Let the whole body answer. Now imagine he has walked for miles under the belief that the stones were part of him. But now he stops at the side of the road. The night is quiet. The air is cool. He lowers the sack from his back. At first he does not know himself without the weight. He almost reaches for it again. But then he stands upright. His breath expands. The road is still before him. Yes, but now the road is not the same. It is no longer road plus burden. It is simply road. And because he is lighter, he can notice what he could not notice before. A turn, a lamp, a path, a bridge in the distance. The burden had narrowed his sight. The release opens perception. So it is inwardly. When you carry the burden, you see only from burden. Every event is interpreted through weight. Every silence becomes danger. Every delay becomes failure. Every uncertainty becomes threat. But when you lay the burden down, perception changes. The same world may appear for a moment, but you see differently. You become available to guidance. You notice the bridge. You hear the quiet prompting. You allow the answer to form without crushing it beneath the old fear. The answer is often delicate at first. It comes as a quiet sense, a small relief, a simple phrase, a softened body, a remembered truth. If you throw the burden upon it again, you may not feel it. But if you make room, it grows. If you lay down the stones, the answer can breathe. If you stop supervising the bridge can form without your interference. I do not supervise the bridge. This may be the hardest stone to lay down, because the mind loves the how. It wants to know the chain of events. It wants to know who will do what, when it will happen, how it will look, how long it will take, what sign will appear first, what must be avoided, what must be arranged. But the how belongs to the intelligence of the state. The end contains the means. When the end is accepted, the means begin to move. Your anxious mind cannot see all the players on the stage of life. It cannot see all thoughts, all timings, all intersections, all impulses, all revisions in the hearts of others. The law can. So do not reduce the infinite to the little map of fear. Do not say, it can only happen this way, unless that. The burden often insists upon one road because it does not trust the bridge. The answer allows many roads because it rests in the end. You do not need to know which path the bridge will take tonight. You need to sleep as the one who has crossed. What would it feel like to have crossed? Not to be crossing anxiously, not to be demanding the bridge, not to be checking the road, but to have crossed. There would be relief. There would be quiet. There would be a sense of completion. There would be no need to carry stones. There would be the phrase, it is handled. Enter that. The burden belongs to the one before the bridge. The answer belongs to the one after. To lay down the burden is to move into after. It is to say, I am no longer the traveler complaining of the road while carrying stones. I am the one who has set the stones down and allowed the road to reveal itself. I do not carry this tonight. I do not solve this by fear. The burden is lifted. The answer is forming. Let these phrases become a ritual of release, not a loud ritual, not a strained ritual, a quiet inward laying down. If the problem appears in thought, say, I do not carry this tonight. If the mind begins to plan in fear, say, I do not solve this by fear. If the old self tries to arrange every incident, say, I do not supervise the bridge. If the body tightens, say, the burden. If doubt asks what is happening, say, the answer is forming. Then return to rest. Do not take the stone up again to see whether you have laid it down correctly. That is another trick of the old state. It says, am I releasing properly? Am I assuming properly? Is the bridge forming properly? Even this can become burden. Let the release be simple. Set it down. Turn toward the answer. Rest. The law does not demand nervous perfection. The law receives accepted state. A child falls asleep in confidence without studying the mechanics of confidence. He simply rests. You too may rest in the state without examining every movement of the rest. Let it become natural. Let it become low and quiet. Let it become almost like breathing. The burden is lifted. The answer is forming. Again, the burden is lifted. The answer is forming. Again, softer. The burden is lifted. The answer is forming. There is something very deep in the phrase lifted. It does not always mean you threw the burden away by force. It may mean it was taken from your identity. It may mean it no longer belongs to I am. It may mean it is no longer your name. It may mean the old weight is no longer carried into the deep. The burden is lifted because you have stopped being the one who must carry it. You are now the one who is guided through. And there is something very deep in the phrase forming. It does not demand that you see the answer complete in outer form this instant. It honors the unseen process. It says, I know the answer is alive in imagination. I know the bridge is forming. I know movement may be hidden. I know the seed is not dead because it is underground. The answer is forming. This gives rest without demanding premature evidence. The burden is lifted. The answer is forming. These two belong together. When the burden is lifted, the answer can form without being smothered by fear. When the answer is forming, the burden need not be carried. The one supports the other. Release gives space. Assumption gives direction. Rest gives the seed darkness. Faith gives the seed life. Now let the old urge to carry everything become unnecessary. You do not carry the thoughts of every person. You do not carry tomorrow's every road. You do not carry yesterday's every wound. You do not carry the burden of forcing the world to agree tonight. You do not carry the fear that the law will fail. You do not carry the responsibility of supervising the unseen. You carry only the state, and the state you carry, the answer is already here, and I do not force the way. This is light enough to carry. It is handled. This is light enough to carry. The way is opening. This is light enough to carry. The bridge is forming. This is light enough to carry. I sleep in the solution. This is light enough to carry into the deep. You see, my friend, the problem was never made lighter by your carrying it. The burden only made you feel that you were doing something. But the deeper work is not in carrying the deeper work is in accepting the answer. The deeper work is in laying down the false responsibility of fear and taking up the true responsibility of state. The deeper work is in sleeping as the one for whom the way opens. If the heart still wants to hold one last stone, speak to it tenderly. Say, you have carried this long enough. You were trying to protect me. You were trying to help. But tonight, we are not protected by fear. Tonight, we are guided by the answer. Tonight, we do not carry the old scene. Tonight, we enter the end. Let even resentment be laid down. Resentment can feel powerful because it remembers injury, but it often keeps the wound alive in imagination. To lay it down is not to say the wound was good. It is to say the wound will not be the final creative image. It is to say, I will not sleep in the identity of injury. I will sleep in restoration, peace, justice, and completion. Lay the stone down. Urgency says, if not now, never. But the fulfilled state does not need to threaten itself. The bridge has timing. The seed has order. The road opens according to the state accepted. Lay urgency down. Let the need to know how be laid down. The conscious mind asks for the how because it wants to feel safe before entering. But safety is found by entering. The how is revealed by the bridge. Lay the need to know down. Let the old scenes be laid down. They have been. You do not need to repeat them to prove they mattered. Their repetition is not healing. Revision and assumption are healing. Lay them down. Let control be laid down. Control is fear with a hard face. It says, I must hold every thread. But the law weaves more finely than your anxiety can weave. Lay control down. Let fear be laid down. Fear has spoken loudly, but it has not spoken truth. Lay fear down. Now the traveler is lighter. Now the night is no longer an enemy. Now the bridge can be sensed. Perhaps not seen fully yet, but sensed. The burden is lifted. The answer is forming. The bridge of incidents begins more naturally when the burden is no longer worshipped. This is the final thing to understand here. As long as the burden is worshipped, the burden remains central. It is examined, honored, feared, protected, carried, and repeated. But when the burden is laid down, the answer becomes central. The state of fulfillment becomes central. The bridge has room to form. Do not worship the burden tonight. Do not worship the fear. Do not worship the old scene. Do not worship the need to know how. Do not worship the pressure. Do not worship the problem by carrying it as your final identity. Lay it down. I do not carry this tonight. I do not solve this by fear. I do not supervise the bridge. The burden is lifted. The answer is forming. The way is opening. The law. I sleep in the solution. And as the burden is laid down, the bridge of incidents begins more naturally, because consciousness is no longer bowing to the weight. It is now turned toward the answer. Now, my friend, there is a quiet arrogance in anxiety, and it must be laid down tenderly. It is the belief that the conscious mind must supervise everything. It wants to know who will move, when they will move, how they will move, what road will open, what hour will be chosen, what conversation must occur, what word must be spoken, what person must remember, what obstacle must be removed, what sign must appear first, and what sequence will prove that the answer is on its way. The conscious mind, not knowing the law, tries to sit over the whole universe like a little clerk with a candle, examining the infinite. But the bridge of incidents does not belong to the anxious mind. The bridge belongs to the law. Your work is not to design the bridge before sleep. Your work is to occupy the end. Your work is not to tell life how to arrange every particle. Your work is to enter the state where the matter is already arranged. Your work is not to supervise the unseen. Your work is to impress the unseen with the fulfilled state. Then the unseen, which is wiser than surface reason, begins to clothe the assumption in ways the waking mind could never have invented. The conscious mind asks, who will bring the answer? The law says, enter the end. The conscious mind asks, when will it happen? The law says, enter the end. The conscious mind asks, how can this possibly change? The law says, enter the end. For the end contains the bridge, though the bridge may be hidden from your present view. The seed contains the tree, though you do not yet see the branches. The fulfilled state contains its own means, though the old mind cannot trace them in advance. If you insist on knowing the means before accepting the end, you remain outside the state. But if you accept the end, the means are compelled to form. Many people delay their own rest because they try to make the bridge visible before they will enter faith. They say, I could believe if I knew the road. I could rest if I knew the person. I could sleep if I knew the hour. I could feel relief if I knew exactly how this matter will be settled. But this is not faith. This is bargaining with appearances. Faith enters the state first. Faith does not demand the map before taking inward possession. Faith says it is done in consciousness, and the bridge will reveal itself. The law works without your supervision. Let that sentence be a relief. The law works without your supervision. You do not need to remain awake tonight as the manager of the bridge. You do not need to watch every possible road. You do not need to arrange every conversation. You do not need to place every person in position. You do not need to instruct the unseen how to obey. The law works without your supervision. This does not make you powerless. It returns power to its proper place. The power is not in anxious management. The power is in accepted identity. The power is not in forcing the middle. The power is in occupying the end. The power is not in telling life every step. The power is in becoming the one for whom the way has opened. Once you become that one inwardly, life finds the road that belongs to that one. Think of ordinary things, simple things, the kind of things men dismiss because they are not dramatic enough for fear. A letter is sent. One hand takes up a pen, perhaps without knowing why that hour was chosen, and the words are placed upon paper. The letter travels. It arrives. It carries a message, a decision, an opening, a correction, a relief. The conscious mind of the one waiting could not have pushed the hand that wrote it. It could not have walked beside the post. It could not have arranged each small incident by worry. Yet the letter is sent. A person changes their mind. Yesterday they seemed firm. Yesterday their answer seemed final. Yesterday their heart seemed closed, their opinion fixed, their manner immovable. But something unseen begins to work. A memory visits them. A word heard elsewhere softens them. A feeling returns. A burden in them shifts. What they would not consider before becomes possible. The conscious mind of the one desiring change could not sit inside another and turn every wheel by force. Yet a person changes their mind. A meeting happens. Two roads cross at the right hour. A conversation begins that no one had planned in detail. Someone is delayed, and because of the delay, another is encountered. Someone takes a different road. Someone is invited by chance, though chance is only a name men give to law when they do not understand it. A meeting occurs, and from that meeting a door opens. The anxious mind could not have calculated every footstep, yet the meeting happens. A forgotten possibility returns. Something dismissed, overlooked, set aside, or nearly lost comes again into awareness. A name is remembered. A paper is found. A phrase spoken long ago becomes useful. A path that seemed irrelevant becomes the very path. A person thinks, why did I not consider this before? The conscious mind, while worrying, could not discover it because worry narrowed its sight. But the law, working through the accepted state, brings the forgotten possibility back. A delay becomes useful. What felt like obstruction becomes protection. What felt like slowness becomes arrangement. What seemed like a refusal becomes timing. The old state cursed the delay because it judged only from the middle, but later from the end, the delay is seen as part of the bridge. It held one thing back so another could arrive. It prevented a premature movement. It placed you at the right hour. It gave another person time to change. It allowed a better form to gather. The conscious mind could not have understood it while it was happening. Yet the delay becomes useful. A word is spoken at the right time, not a speech perhaps, not a great announcement. Just one word, one sentence, one small communication, spoken in the proper moment, and it changes the direction of the whole matter. It opens a door. It ends confusion. It brings reconciliation. It restores confidence. It confirms the way. It says what needed to be said. The anxious mind may have tried to force many words before their hour, but the word that belongs to the bridge comes naturally, cleanly, with the timing of the state. An obstacle quietly moves, not with public announcement. It simply ceases to stand in the same way. A person who opposed no longer opposes. A condition that blocked no longer blocks. A rule is changed. A misunderstanding is corrected. A fear dissolves. A circumstance rearranges itself so gently that looking back you wonder why you thought it immovable. The conscious mind, striking at it in panic, could not move it. Yet when the state changed, the obstacle quietly moved. This is how the law, not always in the form the anxious mind demanded, but in the form required by the fulfilled state. The bridge may be ordinary in its materials, but extraordinary in its arrangement. A letter, a meeting, a changed mind, a delay, a remembered possibility, a spoken word, a quiet removal. These are the common stones of the bridge. The law does not always use fire from heaven. It often uses the natural movements of life, arranged by an unseen order, to fulfill the state assumed. Therefore, do not despise the ordinary. The bridge of incidents is often woven from ordinary threads. A person wakes with a new thought. A conversation turns unexpectedly. A book is opened at a line. A friend mentions a name. A door that was ignored becomes important. A mistake redacts the path. A waiting period ripens the answer. The old mind says, "This is nothing." But the law may say, "This is the beginning." You do not need to design these details before sleep. The bed is not a workshop for anxious engineering. The night is not given to you so that you may draw maps of every possible event. Sleep is the chamber where the answer is accepted. The bridge is not planned by fear in the dark. It is formed by the law from the state impressed upon the deep. If you use the night to plan the bridge, you remain in the middle. If you use the night to occupy the end, the bridge begins to form without your interference. The middle is not your home tonight. The end is your home. The middle asks, "How will this happen?" The end says, "It is done." The middle asks, "Who will move?" The end says, "The right ones move." The middle asks, "When will the road appear?" The end says, "The way is opening." The middle asks, "What if it fails?" The end says, "I do not live from failure." The middle asks, "Must I not supervise?" The end says, "The law works in silence." The conscious mind wants to supervise because it does not trust what it cannot see. But the greatest movements of life have always begun unseen. You did not supervise your own birth. You did not command the sun into morning. You do not instruct the heart through the night. You do not tell the seed how to divide in the earth. You do not explain to the body how to heal a wound in sleep. A deeper intelligence knows its work. And when you give that deeper intelligence a state, it knows how to build the corresponding world. The law does not ask you to become careless. It asks you to stop confusing anxiety with care. It asks you to stop placing the conscious mind in a position it cannot fill. The conscious mind can choose, it can attend, it can imagine, it can consent, it can refuse the old state and enter the new. But it cannot see all roads, it cannot calculate all, it cannot arrange every incident across time, it cannot understand the full architecture of the bridge while standing before the first stone. So give the conscious mind its proper task. Choose the end, feel the end, sleep in the end. Return to the end when the old question rises. Let the bridge belong to the law. If you try to supervise the bridge, you may disturb the seed. You may plant the end at one moment and dig it up the next by asking, "Is it growing? Where is it? Why is it hidden? What if the seed has failed?" But no farmer plants a seed and then tears open the ground every hour to examine the root. That would not be diligence. It would be mistrust. The seed grows best when it is left in the darkness prepared for it. So it is with your assumption. You plant the solved state. You cover it with sleep. You let the unseen do its work. You do not disturb it by constant inspection. You do not disturb it by telling the law that it must use only one road. You do not disturb it by rising tomorrow and saying nothing has happened, merely because the full harvest is not yet visible. You let the state grow. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. This means I do not supervise the bridge. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. This means I do not disturb the seed. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. This means the law knows the road. Now if the old mind asks, "But what if I must do something?" Answer it gently. You will do what belongs to the state when the hour comes. Inspired action will not be prevented by rest. True guidance is not lost because you sleep in faith. In fact, action becomes clearer when it is no longer born from panic. The word you must speak will have less fear in it. The letter you must write will have a different tone. The decision you must make will come from a quieter center. The road you must take will feel less forced. Rest does not destroy right action. Rest purifies action. The anxious mind fears that without supervision, life will collapse. But it has supervised many nights and often produced only exhaustion. Let it admit this softly. Has the old supervision brought peace? Has the constant planning from fear produced the answer? Has the mind's nightly court solved the matter? Or has it only repeated the problem? Tonight, try another way. Give the law the end. Give sleep the answer. Give the subconscious the fulfilled state. Let the bridge form. A letter is sent. A person changes their mind. A meeting happens. A forgotten possibility returns. A delay becomes useful. A word is spoken at the right time. An obstacle quietly moves. Let these possibilities remain open. Do not make one of them the idol. Do not say, it must be this letter, this person, this hour, this conversation, this exact road. The fulfilled state may use one or many, expected or unexpected, known or unknown. The bridge belongs to the law. Your task is not to narrow the infinite through fear. Your task is to accept the end and allow the infinite to arrange. When you demand a particular bridge from the problem state, you may be limiting the answer to what fear can imagine. Fear has a poor it only sees emergency. It only sees the nearest handle to grab. But the fulfilled state has a wider vision. It does not panic over one closed road because it knows the destination. It does not worship one person as the only instrument because it knows the law has countless instruments. It does not curse one delay because it knows timing may be part of the answer. Therefore, enter the destination. Enter the feeling after. Enter the relief. Enter the solved state. Enter the words, it is handled. Then allow the bridge to be wiser than your current map. The conscious mind may say, but I need certainty. Very well. Give it the only certainty that matters before sleep. Consciousness is cause. State produces expression. Imagination selects. Assumption is creative. The end accepted forms the bridge. These are the certainties. The exact hour, the exact road, the exact instrument, the exact sequence. These are not required. To demand them is to return to supervision. Say gently, I do not need to know who tonight. I do not need to know when tonight. I do not need to know how tonight. I do not need to know what road tonight. I do not need to know what conversation tonight. I do not need to know what event tonight. I need only enter the end. I need only sleep in the solution. I need only let the law work. Let this become a release from the burden of knowing. There is a kind of knowing that belongs to faith. And there is a kind of knowing that belongs to fear. Fear wants to know every detail because it does not trust the state. Faith knows the end and lets the details form. Fear says, tell me everything before I rest. Faith says, I rest because the end is accepted. Fear demands evidence first. Faith becomes the evidence within. Now, your inner work is simple. If the mind asks who, say the right ones are moved. If the mind asks when, say the appointed hour is included in the state. If the mind asks how, say the bridge is forming. If the mind asks what road, say the way is opening. If the mind asks what must I do, say I enter the end and right action will come. If the mind asks what if I cannot control it, say I was never meant to control the bridge. I was meant to occupy the state. This is enough. Do not continue the debate. The purpose of the answer is not to win an argument with the surface mind. The purpose is to return consciousness to the end. Give the answer, then rest. Give the answer, then soften. Give the answer, then enter the scene after fulfillment. Give the answer, then sleep. The law works without your supervision. Let that become a comfort. The law works without your supervision. Let the body stop managing the unseen. The law works without your supervision. Let the mind stop drawing fearful maps. The law works without your supervision. Let sleep receive the end. Imagine now, not the bridge, but the end. Do not imagine the letter being written unless that naturally implies completion for you. Do not imagine every conversation unless it gives relief. Do not imagine the machinery. Imagine the result. Feel the simple fact that the problem no longer has power. Hear someone say, it is settled. Hear yourself say, thank God it is done. Feel the chest soften. Feel the hands open. Feel the mind release its need to supervise. This is occupying the end. The bridge may then choose its own garments. It may wear the garment of a letter. It may wear the garment of a meeting. It may wear the garment of a changed mind. It may wear the garment of a useful delay. It may wear the garment of a right word. It may wear the garment of a quietly moved obstacle. It may wear a garment you have not named. Let it, the state knows its own expression. The problem state tries to build the bridge from fear. The answer state lets the bridge arise from fulfillment. The problem state says, I must know the road. The answer state says, I know the end. The problem state says, I must control the people. The answer state says, the right people are moved by the state. The problem state says, I must force the timing. The answer state says, the appointed hour belongs to the bridge. The problem state says, I must stay awake to make sure. The answer state says, sleep seals the assumption. Again, do not mistake this for idleness. Idleness is a state of emptiness. Assumption is full. It is full of the end. It is full of relief. It is full of quiet certainty. It is full of identity. From such fullness, action may come, but it will come naturally. The one who has accepted the end does not act like the one who is begging for it. His tone is different. His timing is different. His perception is different. He may speak less and accomplish more because he is no longer scattering his energy through fear. The law can use your action, but it does not need your anxiety. The law can use your words, but it does not need your panic. The law can use your movement, but it does not need your restless supervision. The law can use your waiting, but it does not need your despair. The law can use silence, delay, meeting, memory, change, and ordinary events. The law can use what you cannot see. Therefore, tonight, do not reduce the answer to what you can personally arrange. If you could arrange it all by the surface mind, you would not be lying here with the burden. Let the deeper power have its place. Let the accepted state be the seed. Let the bridge be formed by law. Now, if you notice the mind reaching forward into the bridge, gently bring it back. It reaches toward who? Bring it back to the end. It reaches toward when. Bring it back to the end. It reaches toward how. Bring it back to the end. It reaches toward proof. Bring it back to the end. It reaches toward control. Bring it back to the end. The end is simple. It is handled. I do not supervise. The law works in silence. I sleep in the solution. There may be a temptation to think, if I do not supervise, I am doing nothing. But entering the end is not nothing. It is the primary creative act. To the senses, it may look like rest. To the unseen, it is instruction. To the surface mind, it may seem too quiet. To the subconscious, it is seed. The most important movements often appear quiet at the beginning because they are occurring in cause. Do not be deceived by quietness. Quietness may be full of power. The womb is quiet. The earth around a seed is quiet. The depths of the sea are quiet. The chamber of sleep is quiet. The imaginal act, accepted, may be quiet. Yet from quietness, worlds take form. Noise is not proof of creation. Strain is not proof of power. Supervision is not proof of faith. Faith rests in the accepted end. Now let ordinary life. A meeting can happen. A forgotten possibility can return. A delay can become useful. A word can be spoken at the right time. An obstacle can quietly move. These are not fantasies. These are natural forms through which states express themselves. Life is full of movable things. Hearts are movable. Roads are movable. Timings are movable. Circumstances are movable. Your own perception is movable. Therefore, do not call the present arrangement final. The present arrangement is only the current costume of a former state. A new state brings a new costume. Do not try to sew the costume yourself tonight. Accept the state. Let the costume be made by the law. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. Let this phrase become softer now. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. I do not force the person. I do not force the hour. I do not force the road. I do not force the I do not force the sign. I do not force the bridge. I enter the end. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. If a specific road comes naturally with peace, you may allow it, but do not cling to it. The road is not the God. The road is only a servant. The end is the state. The law may use that road or another. Do not bind the infinite with anxiety. Allow the end to be true, and let the road be selected by the deeper wisdom. This is all, not by breaking law, but by fulfilling a deeper law than the surface mind had considered. Men call it coincidence. They call it chance. They call it strange timing. They call it good fortune. But when you understand states, you will see that life is moving in harmony with imaginal activity. You assumed the end, and then incidents gathered themselves. You entered the answer, and then the bridge appeared. The conscious mind loves to say afterward, I could never have planned that. Precisely. It could not. That is why it should not try to supervise the bridge before sleep. The conscious mind may recognize the bridge afterward, but it rarely designs it beforehand. The law is more subtle. It moves through the desires, memories, fears, impulses, and decisions of many, arranging without announcement, fulfilling without explanation, until the end appears natural. The true bridge often appears so natural that the unawakened mind thinks nothing mysterious occurred. But the awakened one sees the pattern. He sees that a letter was delayed so another could arrive. He sees that a meeting happened because one small event changed the hour. He sees that a word spoken casually opened a door. He sees that a refusal became protection. He sees that what seemed like obstruction placed him where he needed to be. He sees the law in the ordinary. But tonight, you do not need to see the whole pattern. You need to stop disturbing the seed. Stop disturbing it with how. Stop disturbing it with when. Stop disturbing it with who. Stop disturbing it with fear. Stop disturbing it with forced planning. Stop disturbing it with constant inspection. Stop disturbing it with the belief that nothing is happening unless the conscious mind can see it. Let the seed be, let the state be accepted. Let sleep cover it, let the law work. The law works best when you stop disturbing the seed. This is the simple end of this teaching. The seed is the accepted, the soil is the subconscious, sleep is the covering darkness, faith is your refusal to dig it up, the bridge is the hidden growth, the harvest is the outer fulfillment. If you disturb the seed every night, you delay your own rest. If you plant it and let it be, the law has room to do what the law does. Tonight, plant the end. It is handled. Do not disturb it. The way is opening. Do not disturb it. The bridge is forming. Do not disturb it. The law works in silence. Do not. I sleep in the solution. Do not disturb it. Let the conscious mind become quiet now. It has asked enough. It has planned enough. It has supervised enough. It may rest. Its true duty tonight is not to manage the universe. Its true duty is to consent to the end. Let it consent. Let it bow out. Let the deeper mind receive. A letter is sent. A person changes their mind. A meeting happens. A forgotten possibility returns. A delay an obstacle quietly moves, and the law, without your supervision, arranges the bridge from the state you have accepted. So do not remain awake as the watcher of the seed. Do not stand over the invisible demanding evidence. Do not reduce the infinite to the small map of fear. Occupy the end. Sleep in the solution. Let the bridge belong to the law. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. The law works without my supervision. The bridge is forming. The seed, the matter is handled. I sleep in the solution. And the law works best when I stop disturbing the seed. Now, my friend, there is nothing more to force. There is nothing more to argue with. There is nothing more to carry into the deep. The night has opened. The senses are softening. The outer world is fading from its throne, and the answer is nearer than the problem. You do not need to solve the problem by pressure. You do not need to hold the mind awake in the hope that fear will become wisdom. You do not need to wrestle with appearances. You do not need to watch the bridge. You do not need to know how. You need only enter the state where the matter is already handled, and let sleep receive that state as true. The problem is solved in consciousness. Let this be the first movement downward. The problem is solved in consciousness, not by strain, not by violence, not by anxious thought, not by forcing the road before its hour. In consciousness, the problem is solved. In imagination, the answer exists. In the deep of being, the burden has already lost its authority. You may rest there now. You may let the surface mind grow quiet. You may let the old question fade. You may let the answer become the room in which you sleep. The problem is solved in consciousness. The answer is already here. I do not force the way. The answer is already here. Not because the senses have announced it yet, not because every visible condition. The answer is already here, because imagination contains the fulfilled state now. The answer is already here, because the state after the solution exists now. The answer is already here, because you may enter it before the world reports it. The answer is already here, and I do not force the way. I do not force the way. Let the body hear that. I do not force the way. Let the breath hear that. I do not force the way. Let the mind hear that. I do not force the way because the bridge belongs to the law. I do not force the way because the deeper mind knows what the surface mind cannot know. I do not force the way because fear is not the builder. I do not force the way because anxiety is not guidance. I do not force the way because the answer has already been accepted in consciousness. The burden is lifted. Let that be soft. The burden is lifted. No more carrying the problem as identity. No more carrying the old scene as prophecy. No more carrying fear as responsibility. No more carrying control as wisdom. No more carrying urgency as faith. The burden is lifted. You do not need to sleep beneath its weight. You do not need to give it another night. You do not need to offer your final feeling to the burden. The burden is lifted and the answer is forming. It is handled. Let these three words become enough. It is handled, not perhaps, not someday, not. It is handled. The matter is handled in consciousness. The road is handled in the unseen. The timing is handled in the law. The bridge is handled by the state accepted. It is handled. Let the shoulders soften. It is handled. Let the jaw loosen. It is handled. Let the breath deepen. It is handled. Let the hands rest. It is handled. Let the old problem lose its place. The way is opening. The way is opening. Even if the senses are quiet, the way is opening. Even if the conscious mind cannot yet trace it. The way is opening. Even if the night gives no visible sign. The way is opening because consciousness has moved. The way is opening because the end has been accepted. The way is opening because what is real in imagination must seek expression. The way is opening, and I do not force it. The bridge is forming. Let the phrase move slowly. The bridge is forming. The bridge is forming through means I do not. The bridge is forming through people, through timing, through thought, through memory, through a word, through a letter, through a meeting, through a delay, through a change, through an opening I could not have planned. The bridge is forming. I do not need to see every beam. I do not need to know every road. I do not need to arrange every event. The bridge is forming from the state I now occupy. The law works in silence. Let silence become friendly. The law works in silence. The seed does not shout in the earth. The dawn does not argue with the night. The heart does not announce each beat. The deep mind does not need noise to build. The law works in silence. Therefore, I do not fear silence. I do not fill it with the old scene. I do not fill it with questioning. I do not fill it with panic. I let silence hold the answer. I let silence carry the assumption. I let silence be the chamber where the solution is accepted. I do not chase the answer. I do not chase what is already mine in consciousness. I do not chase the state I now occupy. I do not chase the bridge before entering the end. I do not chase a sign in order to believe. I do not chase the outer world as though it were cause. I return to cause. I return to imagination. I return to I am. I return to the state where the answer is already here. I do not wrestle with appearances. Appearances may speak of what has been. They may report the older. They may seem fixed for a little while, but I do not wrestle with them tonight. I do not argue with shadows on the wall. I do not ask the mirror to change before I change the face. I do not beg the outer world to give me permission to rest. I enter the answer now, and the appearance must follow the state. I do not carry this into sleep. Let that be a quiet release. I do not carry this into sleep. I do not carry the old fear. I do not carry the old question. I do not carry the old scene. I do not carry the old disappointment. I do not carry the burden of how. I do not carry the need to supervise. I do not carry the problem as my final identity. I do not carry this into sleep. I release the problem. I release it from my body. I release it from my breath. I release it from my hands. I release it from the forehead. I release it from the heart. I release it from the last thought before sleep. I release the problem, not because I abandon the desire, but because I enter the fulfilled state. I release the problem so that the answer may be received. I receive the solution. I receive the solution as state. I receive the solution as relief. I receive the solution as guidance. I receive the solution as quiet certainty. I receive the solution before the senses report it. I receive the solution in imagination where all true receiving begins. I receive the solution now, inwardly, gently, without force. I sleep in the answer. I sleep in the answer, not in the question. I sleep in the answer, not in the fear. I sleep in the answer, not in the old scene. I sleep in the answer, not in waiting. I sleep in the answer, not in tension. I sleep in the answer, and the answer goes down into the deep. I sleep in peace, not because every surface detail has been explained, not because the conscious mind has conquered life. I sleep in peace because the state has been chosen. I sleep in peace because the burden is lifted. I sleep in peace because the answer is already here. I sleep in peace because the law works in silence. I sleep as the one guided. I am guided. I do not need to know the whole road tonight. I am guided. I do not need to see the whole bridge tonight. I am guided. The right movement will come. The right word will come. The right door will open. I sleep as the one guided. I wake as the one for whom the way has opened. Let that be easy. I wake as the one for whom the way has opened, not as the one defeated by appearances, not as the one still carrying the old burden, not as the one who must force the answer from life. I wake as the one for whom the way has opened. I wake guided. I wake relieved. I wake from the state of the answer. I wake with the bridge forming around me. I wake as the one who knows it is handled. It is done. Let these words be gentle. It is done. Not shouted, not forced, not argued. It is done. It is done in consciousness. It is done in imagination. It is done in the state, now accepted. It is done in the deep. The outer world must become witness. The bridge must form. The answer must clothe itself. It is done. The problem is solved in consciousness. The answer is already here. I do not force the way. The burden is lifted. It is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. The law works in silence. I do not chase the answer. I do not wrestle with appearances. I do not carry this into sleep. I release the problem. I receive the solution. I sleep in the answer. I sleep in peace. I sleep as the one guided. I wake as the one for whom the way has opened. It is done. Again, slower now. The problem is solved in consciousness. The answer is already here. I do not force the way. The burden is lifted. It is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. The law works in silence. I do not chase. I do not wrestle. I do not carry this into sleep. I release the problem. I receive the solution. I sleep in the answer. I sleep in peace. I wake guided. It is done. Now let the body follow. The shoulders soften because it is handled. The jaw loosens because the argument is over. The chest releases because the burden is lifted. The hands rest because there is nothing to force. The forehead smooths because the bridge is not mine to supervise. The heart quiets because the answer is already here. The whole body becomes the body of the solved state. It is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I receive the answer. I sleep in peace. Like a sound heard far across a field at night. It no longer commands the room. It no longer names you. It no longer sits upon the throne. It is only an old state trying to speak, and you are no longer listening from within it. You are in the answer now. It is handled. Let the old question fade. The way is opening. Let the old urgency fade. The bridge is forming. Let the old need to know fade. I do not force. Let the old control. I sleep in peace. Let sleep come. If a thought comes, let it pass through the answer. If the thought says, what if? The answer says, it is handled. If the thought says, there is no way, the answer says, the way is opening. If the thought says, you must force it, the answer says, the law works in silence. If the thought says, do not sleep yet, the answer says, sleep seals the state. If the thought says, carry the problem, the answer says, the burden is lifted. If the thought says, remember the old scene, the answer says, it is replaced. If the thought says, you are not safe, the answer says, I am guided. If the thought says, you are alone, the answer says, I am supported. If the thought says, the solution is far away, the answer says, the answer is already here. If the thought says, how? The answer says, the bridge is forming. And then, return to peace. It is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I receive the answer. I sleep in peace. Again, it is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I receive the answer. I sleep in peace. Let the phrases become less like words and more like breath. Let them move slowly. Let them. A breath. The bridge is forming. A breath. I do not force. A breath. I receive the answer. A breath. I sleep in peace. A breath. The problem is solved in consciousness. The answer is already here. The burden is lifted. It is handled. I do not need to know the road. I do not need to know the hour. I do not need to know the instrument. I do not need to know the conversation. I do not need to know the visible sequence. I need only let the law work. It is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I receive the answer. I sleep in peace. Now imagine, only if it comes easily, that the problem has already ended. Do not strain to see the details. Do not build a complicated scene. Let it be simple. Perhaps you hear someone say, "It is settled." Perhaps you hear yourself say, "Thank God it is done." Perhaps you hold a letter with good news. Perhaps you simply lie in bed with the quiet knowledge that the matter no longer has power. Feel only the after of relief, the after of peace, the after of completion, the after of being guided, the after of the burden lifted, the after of the way opened, the after of the answer received. It is handled, the way is opening, the bridge is forming. I do not force. Think from after. From after the question is over. From after the pressure is gone. From after the fear has no argument. From after the bridge has served. From after you are no longer waiting. From after you are no longer pleading. From after you are no longer carrying. From after the words are simple. It is done. It is handled. All is well. The way has opened. I am guided. I sleep in peace. Let after become not the struggle, the relief, not the wound, the revision, not the burden, the freedom, not the problem, the solution. It is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I receive the answer. I sleep in peace. Now the words may grow quieter. Handled, opening, forming, no force, receiving, peace. Handled, opening, forming, no force, receiving, peace. The law is simple when the stage is accepted. You do not need to decorate this night with many thoughts. You do not need to explain the principle again. The deep already understands feeling. Give the deep the feeling. It is handled. Let the deep receive. The way is opening. Let the deep receive. The bridge is forming. Let the deep receive. I do not force. Let the deep receive. I receive the answer. Let the deep receive. I sleep in peace. Now, if sleep comes before these words are finished, let sleep come. You do not need to remain awake to prove sincerity. Sleep is not failure. Sleep is the door. Sleep is the seal. Sleep is the quiet descent of the accepted state into the subconscious. If you fall asleep in the answer, you have given the answer to the deep. Let the words fade. Let the feeling remain. Let the body descend. It is handled. The way is opening. The bridge. I sleep in peace. Again softer. It is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I receive the answer. I sleep in peace. The problem is solved in consciousness. The answer is already here. I do not force the way. The burden is lifted. It is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. The law works in silence. I do not chase the answer. I do not wrestle with appearances. I sleep in the answer. I sleep in peace. I sleep as the one guided. I wake as the one for whom the way has opened. It is done. Now, let the old identity dissolve. I am not the problem. I am not the fear. I am not the delay. I am not the silence. I am not the mistake. I am not the old scene. I am not the burden. I am not the one who must force. I am the consciousness in which the answer is born. I am the one for whom the way opens. I sleep as the one answered. It is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I receive the answer. I sleep in peace. Let I am be joined now to the answer. I am guided. I am supported. I am free. I am relieved. I am in the solution. I am at peace. I am the one for whom the way opens. I am not the problem. I am not the burden. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I receive the answer. I sleep in peace. Now the old scene is no longer fed. The old conversation is no longer fed. The old rejection is no longer fed. The old fear is no longer fed. The old failure is no longer fed. The old silence is no longer fed. The old burden is no longer fed. The old problem is no longer fed. The answer is fed. Relief is fed. The law is given the seed. It is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I receive the answer. I sleep in peace. Let the silence between the phrases grow wider. It is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I receive the answer. I sleep in peace. Longer now. It is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. I do not force. The bridge is forming. If the mind tries to ask when, let the answer be very small. The way is opening. If the mind tries to ask why, let the answer be very small. The law works in silence. If the mind tries to carry the burden, let the answer be very small. It is handled. If the mind tries to remain awake, let the answer be very small. I sleep in peace. and then let it go. Do not follow the thought. Do not chase. Let it go. It is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I receive the answer. I sleep in peace. The body is now invited to become heavier, heavy with rest, not with burden, heavy with surrender, not with fear, heavy with sleep, not with defeat. The shoulders are soft, the breath is low, the jaw is loose, the chest is open, the hands are quiet, the forehead is smooth. The answer is accepted, it is handled, the way is opening, the bridge is forming. I do not force, I receive the answer. I sleep in peace. The law works while I rest. The law works while I sleep. The law works without my fear. The law works without my fear. The law works without my supervision. The law works without my force. The law works in silence. The law works from the state accepted. The state is accepted. It is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I receive the answer. I sleep in peace. Now, let the phrase become even simpler. It is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I receive. I sleep in peace. Again, it is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I receive. I sleep in peace. Again, let the heart answer each phrase. It is handled. The heart rests. The way is opening. The heart trusts. The bridge is forming. The heart stops supervising. I do not force. The heart releases. I receive. The heart opens. I sleep in peace. The heart becomes quiet. Now let the problem be placed outside the room of sleep, not rejected in anger, not feared, simply not carried in. The door of sleep opens. You do not enter with the argument. You do not enter with the old fear. You enter with relief. You enter with trust. You enter with the feeling that the matter is handled. It is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I receive. I sleep in peace. The problem is solved in consciousness. The answer is already here. The burden is lifted. The old state is released. The old identity is removed. The solution is alive in imagination. The bridge is forming. The law works in silence. I sleep in peace. Let the words begin to dissolve now. Handled, opening, forming, no force. Receive, peace. Handled, opening, forming, no force. Receive, peace. The answer is here. The answer is here. The answer is here. The answer is here. I do. The way is opening. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. The bridge is forming. The bridge is forming. The law works in silence. The law works in silence. The law works in silence. I sleep in the answer. I sleep in the answer. I sleep in the answer. I sleep in peace. I sleep in peace. I sleep in peace. And if the outer world still appears unchanged for a moment, it is not my master. It is the. I sleep in imagination. I sleep in the answer. I sleep where the solution is already real. I sleep where the bridge is forming. I sleep where the burden is lifted. I sleep where it is handled. It is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I receive. I sleep in peace. Now the night receives the state. The deep receives the state. The subconscious receives the state. The body receives the state. The world will receive the state in form. It is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I receive. I sleep in peace. Let there be no more inner labor now. No more pushing. No more reaching. No more demanding. No more checking. No more measuring. No more returning to the old scene. No more holding the burden as proof of seriousness. The desire is honored by the state of fulfillment. The answer is honored by rest. The seed is honored by being left undisturbed. It is handled. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I receive. I sleep in peace. The problem is solved in consciousness. The answer is already here. The burden is lifted. The way is opening. The bridge is forming. The law works in silence. I do not chase. I do not wrestle. I do not carry this. I release. I receive. I sleep. I wake as the one for whom the way has opened. It is done. Again softer. I release. I receive. I sleep. I release. I receive. I sleep. I release the problem. I receive the solution. I sleep in peace. I release the burden. I receive the answer. I sleep in peace. I release the old scene. I receive the revised end. I sleep in peace. I release the old scene. I receive the bridge is forming. I do not force. I receive. I sleep in peace. Now let even the phrase the problem fade. It need not be named. It need not be remembered. It need not be studied. It need not be brought forward. The answer is enough. The answer is here. Relief is here. Peace is here. Guidance is here. Sleep is here. The law is here. It is handled. The answer is here. The bridge is forming. I do not force. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I sleep in peace. Again, it is handled. The answer is here. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I sleep in peace. Let the body become very still. Stillness is not emptiness. Stillness is acceptance. Stillness is the answer, entering the deep. Stillness is the burden, no longer being carried. Stillness is the seed undisturbed. Stillness is the law. I sleep in peace. The answer is here in imagination. The answer is here in consciousness. The answer is here in the state. The answer is here in relief. The answer is here in peace. The answer is here in the deep. The answer is here in a 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 deep. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I sleep in peace. The way is open in consciousness. The solution is accepted. The end is accepted. The state is accepted. The burden is lifted. The seed is planted. The bridge is forming. The law works in silence. The answer is here. It is handled. I do not force. I sleep in peace. There is nothing more to add. Nothing more to fix tonight. Nothing more to carry. Nothing more to replace. The answer has been accepted. The state has been chosen. The burden has been laid down. The bridge has been given to the law. Sleep may come. It is handled. The answer is here. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I sleep in peace. And as I sleep, the law continues. As I sleep, the seed remains in the deep. As I sleep, the bridge forms beyond my supervision. As I sleep, the answer is accepted more fully. As I sleep, the way opens. It is handled. The answer is here. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I sleep in peace. I wake guided. Let that be the morning seed. I wake guided, not confused, not burdened, not trapped, guided. I wake as one for whom the way has opened. I wake as one who does not rush back to the old state. I wake as one who carries the answer into the day. I wake guided. It is done. Again, it is handled. The answer is here. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I sleep in peace. I wake guided. It is done. Again, slower. It is handled. The answer is here. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I sleep in peace. I wake guided. It is done. Now let the words drift. It is handled. The answer is here. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I sleep in peace. I wake guided. It is done. The problem is no longer the final word. The answer is the final word. Fear is no longer the final feeling. Relief is the final feeling. Force is no longer the final movement. Rest is the final movement. The burden is no longer the final identity. Guidance is the final identity. The old scene is no longer the final image. The solved state is the final. It is handled. The answer is here. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I sleep in peace. I wake guided. It is done. Let this be the last door. It is handled. Let this be the last breath. The answer is here. Let this be the last state. The bridge is forming. Let this be the last trust. I do not force. Let this be the last release. I sleep in peace. Let this be the last descent. I wake. It is handled. The answer is here. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I sleep in peace. I wake guided. It is done. Again, it is handled. The answer is here. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I sleep in peace. I wake guided. It is done. Again, it is handled. The answer is here. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I sleep in peace. I wake guided. It is done. Again, no force. Peace, guided, done. It is handled. The answer is here. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I sleep in peace. I wake guided. It is done. It is done in consciousness. It is done in imagination. It is done in the state. It is done in the deep. It is done beyond appearances. It is done beyond fear. It is done beyond the old scene. It is done beyond the burden. It is done. It is handled. It is done. Now rest. Rest as the one answered. Rest as the one guided. Rest as the one relieved. Rest as the one for whom the way opens. Rest as the one who does not force. Rest as the one who receives. Rest as the one who sleeps in peace. It is handled. The answer is here. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I sleep in peace. I wake guided. It is done. Let sleep take the phrase. Let sleep take the fulfilled assumption. Let sleep take you into peace. It is handled. The answer is here. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I sleep in peace. I wait guided. It is done. There is no need to hold the words now. Let the words hold you. There is no need to keep the state by effort. Let the state carry you. There is no need to remain awake as proof. Let sleep be proof. There is no need to force the answer. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I sleep in peace. I wake guided. It is done. It is handled. The answer is here. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I sleep in peace. I wake guided. It is done. It is handled. The answer is here. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I sleep in peace. I wake guided. It is done. And now, finally, let even the repetition become quieter. I sleep in peace. I wake guided. It is done. It is handled. The answer is here. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I sleep in peace. I wake guided. It is done. It is handled. The answer is here. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I sleep in peace. I wake guided. It is done. It is handled. The answer is here. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I wake guided. It is done. It is handled. The answer is here. The bridge is forming. I do not force. I sleep in peace. I wake guided. It is done. It is done. It is done.